This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to glean and have such a material motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come above board to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the Grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 339. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khaled.
And today, we are back. It's that time again. We are back with the Grotto of Truth Discord Q&A questions on this lovely Juneteenth Friday, June 19th.
It is Juneteenth,
Happy to all who celebrate. And we had some unexpected delays today, so we're starting a little later and a little shorter, but we still have some good questions lined up from our Grotto heads way back, I think, in late 2022.
But some of these are good. Some of these, the same thing we always talk about, where they're weirdly pressing in a way. They really they saw certain things coming for sure.
Yeah. It's hard to think back on how, I don't know, 2022, the vibes compared to today, where things on one level are so much crazier that some of the, I don't know, maybe some of the anointed things we were talking about in 2022 were a little more niche than they are now, but also things have been more slopified. So, I don't know. Khalid nose cam, let's go, they say.
No, wait, what?
It's a fun angle.
You're I'm at a weird angle.
You're half cut off. Oh yeah, there you go.
All right, there you go.
Yeah. Sorry, Griffin. No more nose angle. No more nose cam.
Yeah, I was
okay.
sitting here while you were away, and I guess my screen. I do remember tilting my screen specifically to fit my face. What was it, like this? I was just kind of here.
You were doing a hiding thing. I hide behind my mic a lot.
I feel like I've had worse angles doing the show before.
Yeah,
honestly.
it's all right.
I'm probably just the side of my face.
It's something new and special every time. Somebody in the chat asked, any plans for a live call-in anytime soon? I would like to do one this summer. I think it would be fun. We're a little overdue. Sure. I think it's
definitely
New Year's was the last time we did it.
Yeah, I think that might be right.
6 months. Yeah, we should do it.
Feels like a long time ago. Yeah, we totally could do one.
Yeah, every one of those always hits our live call-in.
We were talking about doing an in-person episode at some point this summer, maybe with the two of us in person.
Oh
maybe, but I don't know. I don't know what the status is. Anyway, let's get to these questions because we might be.
We'll get into it.
Shorter today than usual. Yeah.
Right. So the first one is a real meaty one. I feel like I have to say up front, we're probably we have to punt a little bit because we want to do our own probably several episodes about this band, but this is something maybe to whet the appetite on a future SJ mini series.
Yeah. I mean, when you say that, my instinct is oh man, let's just keep the 2 parts at most. But I don't know, I could, because the adulation of for this group gets me going.
And this is a special one. This could be a 5-parter. I mean, there's everything flows from this band. Everything, it is that's what the lore is.
Let's just
okay, why don't you want to read
I'll
that
go
one?
Ahead.
Okay.
par_cheesy with a capital E asks on October 3rd at 2022, SJ question: did the Beatles write their own music? Done a bit of research into it, and it looks like the release schedule in combo with touring makes it seem physically impossible for them to have written and released most albums after Rubber Soul. That's an interesting take on the like outliers theory, the Malcolm Gladwell thing of like they just put in their 10,000 hours, just worked harder than anybody. Like, no, it's impossible. They couldn't have worked.
They couldn't have added up to the 10,000 hours to do it.
Would love a sus Beatles episode in general. Yeah, it's really about time. I mean, there's so many like iconic. We've done like kind of more like obscure, like off the beaten path, like music artists. I feel like, but we haven't music episodes. We haven't dealt with the Beatles or with Elvis and like a lot of
right.
Yeah, I mean, we did the Eagles, we did CCR, but
kind of like the weird scenes milieu in general of like the Doors and
we did Bob
the Birds.
Dylan. That was a big one.
Yeah, Bob Dylan was a good one.
It's taken a while for us to broach the Beatles and Elvis, but this person writes, I personally believe Paul McCartney was killed and replaced with Billy Shepherd, aka Billy Shears. Interesting.
Well, that's one that I've definitely heard for years, and it has been the subject of like various documentaries. I think there was an early Netflix streaming. There was a like Paul is Dead documentary that was maybe like 2014, 2015, and certainly a lot of people on YouTube and in the kind of podcast space, like internet radio, whatever. It's a long running like conspiracy theory fave for a lot of people is the Billy Shears thing.
Why was he killed in the theory?
Not necessarily that he was like there might be different flavors of it, honestly. I have to say the
questioner says he was killed.
I've perused. Well, yeah, it's unclear from the questioner if they mean like they just happened to be killed.
Oh, he
under
was
some
killed
circumstance.
like in a car accident.
I think that's the general theory, is that he died in like either a motorcycle or a car accident in maybe 1965 or 66, and then they recruited, because I've heard all kinds of explanations for like why, from maybe the more quotidian to the more like sinister, deep British deep state kind of thing. But the more quotidian one is that they fear that there would be like a mass suicide outbreak of teenage girls if it was revealed that Paul McCartney died at that point in their career. And so they had to recruit a lookalike who does look remarkably a lot like Paul McCartney and like appears to sing and play bass like at roughly the same level that he does, So I've always had a little bit of like a tough time with like the he is Billy Shears kind of thing, even though it is like it's obviously fun and intriguing. I also find
like the reasoning of, I mean, maybe there's one that's persuasive. I can't think of one myself. Like what would justify like the lookalike and why it would be necessary, since like the Beatles were just allowed to break up like not too long after that whole speculation started.
Right.
So like I feel like if all the things that did happen could have been allowed to happen, and there was no concern about that, then
right, like I get that a lot of other 60s rock stars were like not quite on the level of standum as
if they had the
Beatles were, but
to like find a guy who looked exactly like Paul McCartney, was like as talented as he was, and but I guess the idea was that he was never talented and they never wrote their own music. So that's like, right. So that's why they played the same, because it wasn't ever that guy. He just looked like him. But still, if they had the resources to give him plastic surgery, you think they could have had the resources to like make the Beatles stay together? Like even if it was just to the point of like threatening them, if they were like if they were willing to do such sinister and clandestine things.
Unless if I'm spitballing about, the actions of a cabal here, like maybe something changed between 1966 and like 1970, because when you look at the rash of dead rock stars, like it really hits in. There's a lot of reasons why that could be, but it's really much more of a very late 60s, very early 70s kind of phenomenon. I forget off the top of my dome, but I'm thinking about like Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison. There's probably a few others that I'm like forgetting, but these were all very big iconic artists who did die. And if you read some other books, like maybe like John Potash's Drugs as Weapons Against Us, like the theories in those books are that those people were killed by either their corrupt management, who maybe had some kind of intelligence or mafia connections or something like that. There's weird stuff in the Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix deaths for sure. But, what you didn't see there is like obviously a thing where they like replace Janis Joplin with like another woman and are like, oh, she's still here because like it'd be so
that
bad if they
theory
died.
has like been universalized. I feel like there's like all sorts of like replacement like celebrity theories now. Like every single celebrity has like the real one died and they've been replaced theory about them.
Yeah, there's that corner of the internet where people do the like. I feel like it almost, maybe it's not the same, but it kind of bumps up against like the cloning centers.
Yeah,
they got to take you to the
definitely
cloning
crossover,
center.
although it's not exactly the same. Like there are those who believe in the replacement and not in the cloning centers, and there is crossover though. Yeah. Like Taylor Swift being Xena LaVey, right? Is that?
Oh, right.
Right.
They do have a striking resemblance to each other. That is kind of interesting. And the chat is feeding us some information here, which is interesting. Griffin says 3 of the biggest pop stars of the 50s. Never forget Big Bopper.
Right, of course.
I love putting Big Bopper
died.
first as like the day we lost Big Bopper. That is the day the music died. Buddy Holly and Richie Valens were the 3 that all died in the plane crash. Yeah. So I mean, they all died in the, of course, produced American Pie eventually, but it didn't like it's like, okay, everyone's dead. And then in most other cases, when a celebrity dies, unless they've pulled the wool over our eyes so many times, and there's a bunch of second gen imposters that we've never unmasked, but I do feel like the idea of like being a rock star or pop star or celebrity like that and dying under kind of like sinister, mysterious circumstances is a more immediately real phenomenon to me than the kind of getting somebody and swapping. Because, there's financial stuff involved also with like certain artists being worth more. We talked about this in our Kurt Cobain episode. Like, somebody being worth more dead than alive at a certain point, depending on what their behavior is.
Yeah.
Like if they get too uppity or they're too radical or something.
I feel like usually it's them being alive that is inconvenient. Even like if there's someone who's like has some kind of powerful aura or charisma or following, but like they, are actually like, there's a power behind the throne that's being, manipulating them or like using them to some other end. Usually the fact that they are still alive is the problem. Like not the fact that they died,
Right.
That
like in the case
better.
of CCR, like they completely stole all their money and like finagled the rights to their music, and it probably would have been like more convenient if everyone in CCR was dead, because they wouldn't have sued Castle Bank and like Burt Cantor and all these people. And honestly,
if Paul had died, like who knows what could have happened. That might have just led to the breakup of the Beatles, but it could have been better for like their management, and like it could have like, rather than the breakup, and it could have like kind of in some way like diffused like the Paul John rivalry, like in a way where like maybe it would have allowed John to kind of like assert his personality over everybody else and like stabilize the group.
If they had replaced Paul and kept going,
found another Paul, who knows? It's an interesting alt hist.
It could have very well been one of like another famous, British rocker that went on to be successful.
They could have gotten Dylan.
Yeah, the super group. Or Mr. Eric Clapton, the most amazing guy of all time.
Yeah.
And he's so lame to me for some reason. I just don't like. I don't like his vibe. I'm sorry. I forget if his politics suck or not, but
I don't know. I don't like him either. I mean,
or pedo occultist Jimmy Page could have joined, at that point, and they would have gone in a different direction. But they did have a relatively
John would have liked that.
I mean, they did.
Remember, he was outraged when Bob Dylan found religion.
Right.
He, of course, he wrote "Imagine," the most annoying song of all time.
That is funny. Imagine no religion. Yeah. I mean, and he himself, that's the other weird thing, is that I feel like there's probably much more evidence that John Lennon was assassinated by like a PTK'd MK Ultra like patsy with the assistance of like an anti-Castro Cuban bellhop or whatever that was living at the Dakota apartment building, that was working at the Dakota apartment, like a CIA Bay of Pigs, like I might have been a Bay of Pigs veteran, but like one of these super sus, like CIA, right wing Cubans was working there. And then you had Mark David Chapman, who had like all these weird connections to like World Vision and all these weird Christian things. And didn't he give Kenneth Anger like a handful of bullets at like a film festival in Hawaii or something? I think we found that in some, I don't know if that was the Eagles episode or something, but he was like, yeah, that's interesting, and then he just like is a weirdo who then goes and like kills like John Lennon for reasons like not. He's just totally insane. That one, and Lennon was, for all his foibles, was an antagonistic celebrity to like the United States government, and was being like surveilled by them, and was seen as like a bit of there was like a battle over his immigration status, like living in America. Like there was some shit there. I never saw that. Was there a documentary like The People versus John Lennon? That kind of, it doesn't go as far as saying like he was killed on a conspiracy, but is more like a liberal, like he was sticking it to the system and they were afraid of a rocker and he, they tried to like get him deported and stuff like that. And then, his partnership with Yoko, who comes from like imperial Japanese like banking royalty, which apparently is like sexist to say, and you can't say that. You're not allowed to like blessed Yoko. I don't think Yoko's all bad. I just think like we have to acknowledge that she does come from like a sus bourgeois Japanese background, and like, being just like a crazy art person, like she didn't just fall out of the coconut tree as like a random person, like. She had like deep international connections and whatever, but
wow. Her father, Eisuke Ono, was a wealthy banker and a former classical pianist who came from a long line of samurai warrior scholars.
That's what I'm telling you. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Isoko, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That's her mother, was the granddaughter of Zenjiro Yasuda, an affiliate of the Yasuda clan and Zaibatsu. Wow.
Of the Zaibatsu knife fame?
I mean, that might be where the name of the knife comes from, but it's like a huge like financial conglomerate. They're like one of their like big old wealthy
like a Mitsubishi
companies.
thing.
Yeah,
it's like a syndicate. Okay,
this is one of those facts I know because of Civ. Like when you're made to Japan, you can build like the Zaibatsu as your special district, I think.
Yeah. So, they got all that going on, and they cross paths. How many times have we seen? I'm trying to think what was the most like kind of recent of like, oh, so and so was like a counterculture freak like celebrity who went and like hung out with John and Yoko, in the 70s. I forget if it was like Stuart Brand, if Krasner hung out with them, like just all those people in that kind of countercultural media milieu of the 70s were definitely like kicking it with them, and but I don't know, but I mean, I guess since we want to get to all of these kind of topics when we do our Beatles series, but the very specific thing that Parcheesi is asking us today is, did they write their own music? And
I'll tell you, I know one song they wrote, which is the fucking best fucking song of all fucking time, Eleanor fucking Rigby.
An earth-shattering song.
Yeah,
an earth-shattering,
just amazing.
Earth-shattering song.
Just brilliant. Only strings, like no good, like at the height of the rock era.
Honestly, like
only
one of the
strings.
There are a lot of Beatles songs I like. That's one of the cornier ones. Like that's like song is twee as fuck. It's like obvious.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's like I get it.
Is. Like it's very overwrought, and like I can see like I just really don't like the Beatles.
I know.
And to me, like that actually is like in a way, like I can see how like if you're looking for a song by the Beatles that's good, that could be like, one of the a song that kind of like is trying to do something, but it's hard to say whether it's like better or worse for that, better or worse for the fact that it's like trying to do something, meaningful, trying to do something interesting. I think honestly, like I find most of the Beatles to be like hopelessly overwrought and like self-important. And I think part of it is John's personality, honestly. Probably, it probably got worse after they killed Paul and replaced him.
Well, yeah.
you know.
Paul, you could definitely like Paul's like hateable on a certain level, but he's also likable in a way that John isn't.
Yeah, he's like a hack, but like
he's a workhorse,
you
know.
Is.
Like
yeah,
he
exactly.
is just a guy who's like he worked so hard pumping out these songs, and like John is like the highfalutin. Wannabe highfalutin, like political with Firebrand. I mean, he wrote some like kind of heavy songs in the early 70s, you know, the ones we could have put in the year of the Phoenix series, you know, like, let me think, with Yoko, you know, like Woman is the N-word of the world,
yeah,
you know?
Right, yeah.
Okay, kind of a Bill Harris urge to say the N-word and be down. But what was the song about, like, John Sinclair? Yeah, about the White Panther activist who got like thrown in jail for having weed. You know, he did that song, The Working Class Hero. Like, you know, that's a very melodramatic song, but I do kind of like the you know, it's kind of a folky, you know, just like him on acoustic guitar, but it's very bitter, you know, like working man kind of anthem that is like pretty heavy. And like I actually like like some of his 70s work is kind of interesting, and he had the political thing going on. It's funny to see what different directions they all took when they like broke up. Like George Harrison's like Guru, you know, like Indian Guru, whatever. I forget what exact kind of sect he got sucked into, but
he was like a Maharishi disciple, but I think he got disillusioned with him, right?
Yeah, he might have. He might have.
Like because the Maharishi was like too much of a sex pest, I feel like.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And that's who Sexy Sadie was about.
Right. Yeah, and you have then again, you also have like the Revolution song, which is like kind of a Symbionese living out army of like when you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you're not gonna make it with anyone anyhow.
Did he regret writing that? I feel like he might have said something like that. Like, I regret.
I have a feeling that he maybe would have. John is the type of guy that would have regretted it in 1971 and like been like, "Please execute me for writing that," and then by like 1975 was like just pretending that like nobody would have cared at that point, and you know, then he could go on and write Imagine, and it would be fine, you know. But I mean,
Revolution is really like a Symbionese living out army song. I mean, did you ever see the Julie Taymor movie, the like jukebox Beatles musical?
Oh, Love.
Is that what it's called? I think that's Across the Universe, right?
Oh,
Across the Universe,
with Evan Rachel Wood.
It was Julie Taymor who made that.
Okay, you're right. I think it was. Yeah, that was before Love, the Broadway musical review of Beatles music came out. No, I never saw Across the Universe.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I feel like you would find it funny. I feel like you would find it funny. I mean, it's one of those like hate watchable things.
How good is it to hate watch compared to Yesterday?
I haven't seen Yesterday, but I know the concept.
You would love Yesterday. It's I mean, it's much more recent, but the premise is so, it gets to the heart of like why I think we both feel a deep urge to like call the Beatles sus, because like the level of lore that movie is kind of resting on, but like it makes no sense. It's basically an alternate reality where the Beatles never existed, and then like one young guy like just wakes up one morning and like knows all the Beatles songs and starts playing them like they're his own, and like everyone's one-shotted in like 2020 by like these Beatles songs.
Ironically, like kind of like an anti-Beatles concept, because it like sort of implies that like if the Beatles had no real impact on like the history of American music, or you know, the history of world music in general, right? Like you know, obviously we're from the UK, even though, like they had no like, or the history of, you know, like they like, so like music just evolved in the exact same way that it would have if there were no Beatles.
Right.
I mean, of course, and like if that were the case, then it is ridiculous that Beatles songs would be popular now. They wouldn't be.
Right. Like it would sound like old music. Like it wouldn't sound like, and so much music that's come before it, they're the most like band that has inspired other music in, you know, certainly in rock music, like over the last, you know, 60 years or whatever, that it's so hard to imagine like all kinds of different genres and waves of music, like not having tipping their hat in some way to the Beatles, like where would Elliott Smith fall in this? You know, that's a smaller example, but like he was very much, despite being like a heroin punk, like, you know, like he had like a childlike love of the Beatles. So did Daniel Johnston, you know, but like everybody down, like the Eagles said that like that was what like Glenn Fry going to an Eagle show and like a hot older girl like passed out and fell into his arms, and he's like, wow, I want to be a rocker. Like, you know, like it literally inspired all of them to like start rock bands. And I think that's the other thing about the Beatles that people get defensive about. And I get like, you know, if this is not true, then maybe it's fair to be defensive about it. A part of what makes the Beatles so powerful is they were the first ones to really be a model of like how to become a successful band that is just like a few people in, you know, a garage, starting from playing like really shitty, like, you know, really small kind of local gigs. Like they were in Hamburg for, you know, a while, playing little coffee houses. And it's like, if you practice, if you grind, if you write enough like good songs that are fresh, if you have like the style and whatever, then you can make it all the way to become like gods, you know, and you could tour around the world and become like this, you know, Dionysian kind of, you know, Superman, you know, kind of thing. But if you say that they didn't write their own music, or that like the Tavistock Institute wrote their music, or Brian Epstein, or who's the George Martin, their producer, the fifth Beatle, like, and a team of ghostwriters wrote all their music, and it was very much an industry creation that was fronting as this like scrappy, totally did it with their own bootstraps kind of thing, then it undermines like that. I mean, it's weird, right? Because like if that is the case, I think we can still safely say that there were bands that like formed and developed under what they thought was the Beatles model that did go on to like become successful. And then, right? Like, I mean, all the bands like of our, you know, our early life and childhood, and maybe things have gotten weird in the industry. Now the industry is like in a weird place the last like 10 years. But think about like the 90s and the you know, 90s, 2000s. Like the late 90s on MTV, it was like, yeah, like most of those bands that blew up or had a hit video or a single or whatever, like most of the time they were like from a local scene. They were just like people. It wasn't that often that you would get like some kind of ridiculous Nepo baby was like the head of the band or even in the band, you know, like it was a way for kind of like middle class or working class people to, you know, like break through and then have a career off of making music. And, you know, the involvement of the big record label and all that shit kind of only comes in a little bit later. Like look at a band like Nirvana, like they scrapped around the Pacific Northwest for a few years, playing a very rough version of what their sound would be, and then kind of got signed to a regional hype label, Sub Pop, and did a first album and kind of like toured around, you know, Europe and shit, and then got, you know, through building their profile enough, they got a deal with Geffen, and then Geffen brought in a real heavy hitter like Butch Vig, the producer, to really like crank the pop factor, the catchy factor on Nevermind. And then that just like, there was a distribution mechanisms like the music, the MTV, the music stores, like CD stores and shit, the radio, like all this kind of stuff was like working to like turbocharge and create a kind of like, you know, like similar to a Beatles mania. Like there was a whole mechanism enabled to like a star making mechanism that, you know, has kind of morphed to these days. Like now it almost doesn't sound so crazy to be like the Beatles were industry plants. It's like, well, they were the most successful band of all time. And everybody today who's the most successful person of the moment seems to be some kind of like, you know, Sabrina Carpenter. Her
like
aunt
totally
is Bart
curated.
Simpson.
Yeah,
high-level Scientologist.
Like her family,
you know?
like bought all like 1 million copies of her first album, stuff like that.
Yeah, Taylor
you know,
Swift.
Like
they founded a vanity record label and moved her to Nashville to give her like samurai training in like being a country pop star. Like it just you know, go down and down, like go down the list.
You
like
know, Geese, Geese,
Mom is writing Polly autofiction in the New Yorker. Like that Oliver Tree guy who just was carbonized beyond recognition in Brazil. Did you hear about that?
No, what? I didn't hear about this. Nor like he was.
I don't know if this is like worth a full episode.
Carbonized beyond recognition.
It's
damn.
if you start looking like on Twitter about it, it's like there's something like insane about like the trajectory of this guy's career, his aesthetic, and the way that he very tragically, we should stress, died in a two helicopter collision in Rio de Janeiro. I think this last weekend, and then they crashed and fell on top of a BYD, like a Chinese electric car dealership or something, and set all of the electric cars on fire, which created like a incredibly hot inferno. And then I guess people translated the Portuguese machine translated the Portuguese articles, and they kept saying that his body was found carbonized beyond recognition. And if you look up, there's like a viral like mega cut of his music videos. I have to say, like, as soon as I saw, I'm like, who the fuck is this wacky like irony goofy guy? Like whatever. His first band, he's from Santa Cruz, and his first band was a ska band called Irony. And like, if you see, I mean, people are kind of freaking out. Like his name, Oliver Tree, is like olive tree. It's like shades of like,
Was it his real name or?
I actually, hold on. I looked up his Wikipedia the other day. Like he dresses very strange. He was kind of hyped up by Skrillex. Yeah, he had kind of like he went to Cal Arts eventually, so that actually puts him into like context, like his weirdness, because Cal Arts people do a lot of like wild performance art with their music. Let's see, yeah, he was the son of Jesse Louis Nickel III, a real estate contractor, and both his parents were traveling circus performers. So he grew up in a mobile motorhome, traveling extensively across the U.S. before going back to Santa Cruz when he was 12. So he kind of grew up like literally like in a traveling circus. But his dad was also a real estate developer or something, or a real estate contractor. Not really sure. And then he struggled with drug addiction, became a local drug dealer in his teen years. He got kicked out of his family home and blah, blah, blah. He was like a scooter champion when he was like in middle school, like a Razor scooter kind of thing. Oh my God, you're going to love this. In 2023, Darman Studios collaborated with Tree to create a motivational short film inspired by his true story, following a musician who faces bullying over his appearance and unconventional music style. I can see like the title for this, like unconventional musician, like shamed by like peers, but then he gets one better on them or something, like classic Darman arc, we love to see it. Kick scootering, extreme sports. And then he started he got into the bro step, dubstep kind of scene in Santa Cruz in the Bay Area, and then got put on by like Skrillex, Zed's Dead, and Frank Ocean actually. So he got, even as like a 17-year-old, and then he went to Cal Arts, and then he opened for Skrillex and Zed as a DJ. But like, you really have to see like his videos, like they're very absurdist and like, but it's that kind of like just weird like humor, like fart, like I'm crazy, like it's just like that kind of shit that is not my favorite brand of I mean, people might wonder like, what is your guys' favorite brand of comedy? You seem to hate all comedy. That's my comedy, is talking about how comedy sucks and it sucks. That's what it is. But then there's almost like an Astro World like
sketch when he goes on this tour. That's
the Tim Robinson sketch.
The Tim Robinson sketch where he goes on the ghost tour. I think that
right.
As you might imagine, many ghost tours in my life. Like, I thought that was funny.
Oh,
and that's
right.
like a pretty
mainstream
comic thing that I did genuinely think was very funny.
Yeah, I appreciated his the Chair Company series about the conspiracy series.
Kind of, right. That kind of makes sense because it's like about it's kind of a parody of people who like go insane like online.
Right.
Getting into like sort of parapolitical topics or whatever. Yeah.
Right. But that's also just an example with just with Oliver Tree, that maybe they don't have the budget and the resources or the will anymore to replace their dead music stars. But he died under Dracula circumstances, I would say. He also like had a lot of interviews and like would joke. He'd do a lot of irony posting about being like hunted by like the government and like the like some kind of deep state is trying to assassinate him, and that like he's, you know, a lot of his song, he almost has a Jim Sullivan thing going on of like When I'm Gone or like Missing You. Like he has all these songs that almost sound like designed to be played posthumously. And then like, wow, it's almost like he
fame
predicted
after
it.
Tom York of Radiohead praised his cover of Karma Police. All right.
That's something everybody wants on their Wikipedia these days. Unclear what his politics were, if he like had any. He is one of those people, showing my like millennial ass, where I literally I don't think I had ever heard of this person.
No.
Or if I saw, I guess I've had it described to me as like, it's very much like a younger millennial, older Gen Z, like 2021. There was like a moment where Oliver Tree was like blowing up with these crazy weird videos, and everyone was like hyped about him, you know, like that was sort of like his little peak. And I guess us older millennials just totally, it was on TikTok a lot. Like he had a ton of TikTok.
Yeah, there
stuff,
are things
you know?
that I just have straight up just missed as like a phenomenon.
Usually it's only when there's like a very young kind of rapper that gets like killed when they're like 21, and I'm like, wait, who? I don't keep up with the rappers, the younger rappers, probably the last I don't know how many years, but they all just sound kind of like Captured by Diddy. I don't know, like I don't know, like it's not, I know there's probably some interesting stuff, but it doesn't feel like I don't know, the early 2010s was felt much more like, wow, interesting, vital. But anyways, like, I guess getting back to the Beatles.
Didn't everything. Yeah, getting back to
the Beatles.
Yeah, we'll take on the Beatles someday.
Yeah, we will. And I mean, yeah, writing their own music. You found like a 4.5 hour like video presentation by some like Boston guy that was like really, he seems to believe in the Paul is dead thing to some extent, and is very like adamant about in this 4.5 hour video, like laying out all the evidence that perhaps the Beatles did not write all their own music. The Lennon McCartney writing duo that was so famed, like might be a little bit of like a PR exaggerate, maybe not totally made up, but like a little bit of an exaggeration that like allegedly these guys pumped out like 200 iconic songs in a period of like 7 years. It's a
funny video. This has like,
I was listening to some of it.
Over like 150,000 views.
People are into it. People want to know. You know?
I like how like Theodore Adorno like comes up as the middle.
Oh yeah, and Willis Harman he cites Willis Harman, who I have not seen invoked in the kind of like Frankfurt School cultural manipulation thing so far. Like we've come up with him in Secret Machine Music at Ampex, and also in all the psychedelic shit, and with Stuart Brand. That's where it was his institute, I think, where Stuart Brand first took acid in the early 60s, and like continued to be, he was one of like the founding fathers of like sus psychedelic underground culture or whatever. And but also a very connected guy. That would be interesting. You know, there's also, I couldn't quite pin it down, but like he mentions it, that like the Tavistock Institute kind of that's something I'd like to pin down. Like, what is up with like the alleged relationship between the Beatles and the Tavistock Institute? Because the Tavistock Institute is kind of like ground zero for whatever Great Britain was doing with like MK Ultra style like research and like social manipulation. That was a huge hub of it, you know, like studying kind of weird and like psychological stuff, like the same kind of almost analogous a little bit to like Stanford Research Institute or something like that, like a place where people are studying incredibly sus shit. And in the 60s, I don't know, like to what extent were they, I don't know, like had any kind of interface with like the hippie counterculture in Britain, or the types of music that was coming in, because that really was the British invasion, you know? Like this is a huge soft power cultural capital, soft power coup for Great Britain. You know, we think about it, this is when the empire is winding down after World War II. The United States has kind of stepped into the driver's seat of like white empire. Great Britain, you know, a little bit analogous today, was humiliated during the Suez Crisis in the mid 1950s, where America basically told them to like back back the fuck down, and they had to because like we controlled their finances and shit, and so they were, you know, these a lot of former colonies like in Africa, or obviously India became independent. Like there was a lot of economic kind of problems and blah blah blah. They were recovering from, you know, being in the war, whatever. And then, you know, they needed a W. They needed a win, you know, in the 60s. How are they going to do that? How are they going to extend the still like the sort of soft power stuff was still an avenue where Britain, you know, they had probably the oldest, the most sophisticated intelligence service in like the West, in the non-communist world, right? And a lot of the early CIA people sort of studied under or were like influenced by, you know, or worked with during World War II, like MI6 type people. And like, and to some extent, like the CIA was sort of modeled on MI6. There were a lot of these Anglo-American kind of special relationship things happening. And then you get this like interesting phenomenon of, you know, lest we forget, that's the other wrinkle about this that needs to be acknowledged. Like, even the idea, it is low-key like racist in a way to be like, oh, if the Beatles didn't exist, like, I mean, maybe it's to say, maybe the movie's not racist Yesterday because
it's
all the
they
all the
were.
music that inspired the Beatles would have still existed, and other people would have just like done what the Beatles did eventually, like, which is basically American black music, like blues, rock and roll, you know, that kind of stuff, and incorporating, you know, they had other influences as well, but when they started out being like a cover, like a Chuck Berry style, like cover band, only playing covers, like for the first couple years of their existence, and it's kind of a sudden turnaround, like when they start releasing their first albums. I think the first few records had like a decent amount of covers on them, and then eventually gradually, I forget what it was, like Help maybe was the first album that was like all original tracks and stuff, but yeah, I don't know, I mean, like it's an interesting thing of like, okay, this like black like rock and roll and blues music apparently was just like very inspirational to these largely like kind of working class young British white bands in the UK, and they started off playing covers of that, which then obviously like that they became reasonably well versed in playing that style of music, and then you could see, okay, and then they decided to write their own versions of those songs, and which I think that video does a good job of pointing out that like a lot of their songs are like really close to the line of other songs that exist.
Yeah,
like to the point I was actually shocked because I'd heard the other song, but the George, this is post Beatles, but George Harrison's My Sweet Lord, I forget what the song it was based on, but in that video he plays both songs over themselves, and besides the lyrics, which are like changed to be Maharishi related, it's like literally every chord progression, the singing style, like the enunciation of it's identical. I guess even John Lennon talked about it in a Playboy interview in 1980, and he said like George knew what he was doing there, you know, like he's too smart to not know that he like ripped off that earlier song that is like identical, you know. And I guess it's not like he did an interpolation and he paid half the rights to like the original person or whatever. It's not like noted as it's just like amazing George Harrison, he just came up with another one. There's an even interesting deeper cut about like Yesterday and Hey Jude being like heavily inspired by, what was it, like Neapolitan like cantatas or something. I like a very remember, specific type of like Italian ballad that was popular around the turn of the century, and Italians like picked up on this very like readily, and we're like, oh, this sounds like this is sung and composed in the style of like a Neapolitan cantata or whatever. But, you know, instead it's just Paul's story. I think I saw the clip, he had the clip in there of him playing it on Colbert where he's like, I had a dream, like, I just had a dream, and there's a song in it, and I thought it was somebody else's song, and I went around and asked John about it. Have you ever heard this song? And he's like, oh, no, I never heard it. And I asked Ringo, and I asked, George Martin, he knows so much about music, and, he said, oh, and I've never heard of it. So I sat with it for a few weeks, and then I realized it might as well be my own song. And then everyone's like, he's so brilliant. Like, but it's kind of like, Interesting. It came to him in a dream. Okay. Like, but it is very heavily like he doesn't acknowledge, he didn't say, "Oh, George Martin showed me some Neapolitan cantatas and I thought they were cool, and I decided to write a song." In the Beatles almost do this thing where, I mean, maybe I'm talking a little out of my ass, at least in that instance, of kind of like contributing to a mystique around how they came up with, you know, like on the one hand we have like the Get Back documentary, which I would watch if we do this series, but I haven't yet. That's like
I've
12 hours of
seen
them.
it. Yeah.
Right?
It's mostly not very interesting.
Okay.
But yeah.
But it allegedly does show kind of like the process of building out certain songs for that record, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
And it's like, oh, there's it's almost conspicuous, like 12 meticulous, boring hours of them like doing the work so that we can put to rest all these things about, you know, but also that was like 1969.
Like a lot of it
they were
is like they like you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, you could say like, oh, they had these songs already because like either they're so like prodigiously talented or like they had them like, you know, they could have had them prepared to begin with, because as I recall, like they come up with these songs incredibly quickly. Like it's, you know like for sort of the what you know will be the ordinary thing to take away from this is that they're just incredibly talented. Like they can write like these songs like almost instantly. Like that's like the impression you get from watching the documentary. Like Get Back, they wrote that in like 2 seconds. Like, you know, like,
kind of sounds like it. No, I mean, it's all right. It's not like the greatest Beatles song by any means, but like it. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Also, they're so examined that it almost like I think a lot of fans of them would kind of be like, somebody would have found something at this point that would puncture the myth of the Beatles if they weren't really like that, just scrappy and whatever, touched by some kind of divine force to like write these amazing songs like this. Surely somebody would have talked or something would have come out. I mean, at the same time, that video I watched part of, has some ambiguous comments. I mean, maybe he's reading too into it, but like Ringo is being interviewed and talks about like the writers that came in and like we were working with the writers and they were very interesting and it opened up new avenues for us, and the grass, and he's like smoking. He's talking about like, I guess 62, 63, when they went from being almost all a cover band to suddenly making their own songs. But like George Martin also says in an interview that like, allegedly Lennon and McCartney had been writing songs together for like 5 years, but like none of those songs I think ended up on like Beatles albums, or maybe were even like recorded. I don't know, maybe a few were, but this video person seems to think it's like suspicious that like you think they would have like a pretty hefty back catalog after going from, I don't know, 57 to 62 making music together, that there'd be some of those like golden nugget Beatles songs in there. But apparently that's not what happened until they enter in like collaboration with like George Martin and get a record deal and have access to like the full kind of studio infrastructure to make like a real record.
Yeah.
So like, they could have brought in some
that's true of
helpful
like
writers.
That's true of like all artists. I feel like it's like there's always kind of this myth, especially like today, right? Like maybe in different periods of time and different contexts, like there was a different understanding of how art is made that was maybe more accurate or inaccurate in different ways. But now like kind of there is this sort of myth of like the genius, right? Like the visionary. And like not to say there aren't people who like are talented or who have a great artistic vision, but a lot of the time the kind of way these things are narrativized like cuts out like all the like people who contributed. I mean, Shakespeare is like a great example, and someone who has like a cult almost as great as that of the Beatles, right? But if you like you can see like a lot of his plays actually like are co-written and with other people, and people say, oh, those are the worst ones and stuff like that, but people didn't know that they were collaborations until like relatively recently in like Shakespeare scholarship. I mean, if you read like his earlier plays, you can see like the influence of Marlowe and stuff like that. Like there's like these people like they didn't have the same. And I mean, I think this is kind of true like in terms of like, oh, they like, were they stealing stuff, or is like a music like that in general, that's kind of like I hate to bring Taylor into it for the third time, but it's kind of like the whole thing with Cruel Summer and Olivia Rodrigo, you know, and like demanding to have like be credited for the interpolation.
Oh, right,
you know?
right.
And like, yeah, okay, but and like, yeah, her songs does sound like basically a mashup of Misery Business and Cruel Summer, like,
Right.
still, like, that is like a pop music often sounds the same. There's a lot of stuff like that you can observe in pop music.
There are, and they're like really like tried and true harmonic and melodic like formulas to pop songs that are almost like a hard science, and they very well could have been to a certain degree, like even back in the 60s too, of like, you know, like really like music theory. I can't think of like the things off the top of my dome, but there's a few like Instagram and TikTok accounts that are always like breaking down like the rules that are used in like, you know, really like Taylor songs or Sabrina songs, where, you know, it's like you repeat the chorus, but then like the second time the last note is like shifted down instead of like up, and that bit, and it kind of resonates with, and it's like a callback, so people like that. It's like there's like little psychological little tweaks that make a song like really like maximally catchy. And you know, you got to believe that people like fucking Dr. Luke and all these other wizards of the studio like know that, and probably the record labels like, you know, really like they'll pay the budget for that and might even insist on it, you know, is like, you have to do it this way and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, like it's I do think, yeah, people are saying in the chat like Bach wrote I don't know, a whole symphony like every week or something like that. And you know, like, yeah, like I know like musicians and, you know, stuff like that write songs like from scratch. It's definitely a thing people do.
Totally.
You know, like it's not like not real, or like once you get to like a certain level, like nobody can do it themselves. Like, or, you know, alternatively, maybe the Beatles did have like more help than is regularly acknowledged in their first couple albums, which wouldn't be that weird. And then they like learned the skills themselves and got like better at being musicians, and maybe were given more artistic autonomy later on. So maybe some of their later stuff is like more genuinely written by them than maybe some of their early stuff, which might have been co-written, who knows. But that's not like a totally weird thing as well. Like, you'd think they're doing so much that they would get better at it, right? Like they seem like they're not a band that like pretends to play their instruments, so they have some talent that is evident by watching them play live, right? You know?
Yeah.
And
I don't know well, no, I mean, definitely I believe that the Beatles could have like, in terms of like the Bach thing being relative to like how the Beatles like wrote their songs, like, yeah, I mean, I think it is totally possible. Like, I kind of feel like, I mean, we've kind of like experienced this too, like you know, like in our own like artistic work, like we haven't like actually like done anything like that in, you know, like we haven't like written a script in a long time, but like when we did, like, you know, there were like it was you know, I feel like we impressed ourselves a couple of times by how easily like it came to us after having done it a bunch, you know. So I feel like there is something to like the outlier stuff, you know. If you practice something a lot, you do get pretty good at it, you know. And I think like Bach almost like I could see, you know, I remember reading like that Bach, like when he started to, am I thinking of the right person? I might be thinking of Beethoven. I don't really know anything about like Baroque, you know, music. Who's the one who went deaf? You know,
Beethoven.
Was Beethoven? Yeah, Beethoven. Yeah, I remember reading that he like, you know, like he got like better at writing music after he lost his hearing, stuff like that. You know, so like you hear like crazy stories about these people, or that, you know, he said that he you know, felt that he was better after he lost his hearing, and things like that, which is, you know, obviously like very impressive. But yeah, you know, so I'm like, again, I wouldn't want to necessarily demean the talent of like these things, but I think that like the kind of, I don't know, I'm always skeptical of like the myth of like the solitary genius, because every time, like, I don't know anything about these people, I only know the stories, you know, I only know like the storybook version, you know. Anytime like you do look into someone like that, it's always more complicated, you know?
Yeah,
Like, even if
yeah.
it's just that, like, they had a wife who did every single thing other than their work for them, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
and they were left totally free to like do whatever they
Yeah.
want. Yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
exactly.
which is, yeah, like, all these, like, great scholars, like, that you read about in the past, like, how the hell did they do this? It's like, they had like wives who didn't do anything else, and some of them even had slaves, you know, like servants, you know.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Granted, you know, there's other factors as well, you know, like, I was getting a little bit far afield from the Beatles, but like there's other factors, like the reason why people don't just like routinely write like 12-volume like masterpieces, you know, the reason why, as you said before, like why is it that like we don't have like the capital, you know, of today, right? It's a book that, like, you know, I hope people won't get mad at me, but like, for whatever value it has, like, there's definitely like a great work of political economy like that could stand to, like, you know, there could be another one, you know, like for our present situation, right? A lot has changed since the 19th century. So, but where is it? It's not anywhere because, you know, for various reasons, but also like, you know, like also like our attention spans have deteriorated. Our ability to do focus work has deteriorated.
Right.
And like the circumstances under which like people wrote books like that have become rarer and rarer.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it is
music,
because
you
of the
know,
damn phones. Yeah.
Yeah, like music
Variety
too.
Plus in the chat says
that earlier, that infrastructure of like fame making infrastructure that could make a young scrappy group who's like random go kind of supernova and build a career has really, you know, kind of broken down. And like the promise of the internet and social media has been a sort of like flimsy, not very effective replacement for it. And so then you do get more, you get the types of people that do have extra resources, extra time to dedicate to their art. Nobody else, everyone else is like too exhausted, like working to survive and like reproduce, you know, to just like sustain their own life, or they have a day job. And then somebody else, like, I don't know if you saw that funny, there was like a Substack about Chloe Zhao, the filmmaker. I think it was sort of tangential to a discussion about maybe that movie Obsession that just came out that like allegedly had like a very small budget and then made a bunch of money. And then people were kind of arguing about like how honest filmmakers are about like how, you know, it's always like a big selling point to be like, I made this movie for I maxed out my credit cards for $20,000 and made this hit movie, you know, and you can too, is the implicit, you know, kind of message there. And then all these other people go into like insane amounts of debt trying to be filmmakers, and then like it doesn't work out. And, you know, so this person went through and kind of added up like the cost of Chloe Zhao's like collective like private school and like NYU film school education, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars in like film grants that she got, even though she says like her first couple films that like got into Sundance were like she and her husband maxed out their credit cards. It was so scrappy.
Right,
but her dad's like a
I did read this article.
multi-millionaire, like magnate from China or something like that. And she does the classic thing where she goes, I've heard rumors that my parents are billionaires. That's so ridiculous. And it's like, girl, nobody's saying they're billionaire. They're saying like, I hate it so much, but like nobody said billionaire, okay? Like they said multi-million, and she's like, actually, I'm really oppressed. I'm so oppressed, like blah, blah, blah. You know, so
thing,
yeah, it's a
like,
classic.
people are saying that like I have $1 trillion.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, like, oh yeah,
So
I guess
not
I have
serious.
$1 gazillion.
Ooh, yeah, I guess I have a mega yacht. And it's like, no, you have a small yacht, which is still really expensive and makes you bourgeois. Like, you know, it's like, yeah. But yeah, like there's those dynamics as well, and like lots of nepos. I mean, like J.J. Abrams' daughter is like a nepo who has a music career now. Sabrina is the niece of Bart Simpson. You know, you could go down the list, like like Geese, like. It just is becoming more a playground for, you need to have those extra resources to like do all that invisible labor kind of to free you up to even do the authentic, you know, in a way it's kind of, people kind of conflate that with being like industry plant or like, you know, but it's a little bit different in that you could still be like Cameron Winter very well could be writing his own songs, but I guess the point we're driving at is that he has the freedom and the resources to do nothing else in his life but focus on being Cameron Winter, the singer-songwriter and musician. And he gets to just like chill. Like he doesn't have to work at like Starbucks or like the Apple store or like do whatever. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have to have like a service level like low income job that just pays his rent, and like he wouldn't even be able to live in New York probably, if he was working a job like that. So it sucks like those. So in a way too, I get why people are so attached to the Beatles, because they are these working class heroes who like didn't come from fancy silk topper like type posh backgrounds in Britain. And compared to somebody like Maddie Healy, who's like a little like BBC actor nepo baby, or Phoebe, what was it, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's like comes from a family of like barons and shit, I think, and like the Fiennes brothers, our favorite actor Joseph Fiennes, they come from like a baronet like family, and like their grandfather was like a knighted industrialist, kind of shit. So it's like, there's always going to be that, but the Beatles gave this different hope that you could be these scrappy guys and not coming from any particularly like super special background, and then become literally knighted, like as a result of, almost become synonymous, like the national band of Britain, and the Rolling Stones as well. There are a few bands that reached that echelon and then were huge over in America and blah, blah, blah. So I can see why people want that to be real, and like, it inspired generations of young bands to try it that way, and some of them succeeded, and a lot of the hit music and beloved music acts from like the late 20th century are completely on that Beatles model. And now that it's even broken down, maybe people like are even more nostalgic about the Beatles, because it's like, like if only we could go back to four boys in Liverpool just grinding it out, or the Ramones in their Long Island garage, or et cetera, et cetera. And it just doesn't feel that way anymore. Like we don't have any state funding for the arts, so you need private wealth, and you need a lot of it to be out of the class that even has to like work for, even the kind of upper middle class that still has to like have a job for a living, and like while they pursue art or whatever. Like you have to be above that. You have to be like certified bourgeois. Like you really don't need to have a job in your life except doing this art thing. And like, then of course some people are going to be good at that. Like they're going to put in their 10,000 hours or whatever, as much as we want to believe in that as a phenomenon, right? But maybe there's one last thing that's like kind of funny before we move on from Beatles. Obviously we'll return to all this stuff later. That is it's an interesting perspective on the Beatles. I've like brought it up before, but I don't think I've ever read it. This is from 2010, and it's by, a humble retired blogger named Fidel Castro Ruz, former president of the Republic of Cuba, on his Reflections of Fidel blog on the Grandma website. Yes, Reflections of Fidel are great, actually. Like I can't seem to find the actual website anymore, but I found a version of this on a forum called Intel Trends, which is like some kind of weird, I don't know, not really sure what this website is about, but it is, interesting. And I remember finding this years ago and being like, oh yeah, like Fidel, our boy was anointed. He knew it was like in his retired years, even though I have been to Cuba, and there's an entire John Lennon park with a bronze statue of like Imagine era John Lennon, like sitting at a bench in the park. And, it used to be a Freemasonic square that had like a Freemasonic monument or whatever, and they like took that away and made it a Beatles park instead. And there's like a Yellow Submarine themed bar like across the street from it that like looks like a yellow submarine on the outside, and they play like American like 90s music videos inside. It's so I mean, I guess like Fidel was like, on the one hand, like he thought John Lennon was kind of cool, like a cool Beatle. It was right on and had good politics, and I guess maybe he said nice things about Cuba in the 70s or whatever. But that doesn't mean Fidel is not still going to be vigilant about the overall Beatles phenomenon. So this is called The World Government, Part 1, by Fidel Castro Ruz, August 19th, 2010. So Fidel writes, I think I put this in the workflow if you want to follow along.
Okay.
So yes, Fidel writes, in my recent reflection of 2 days ago, August 15th, I wrote, commenting on an article by Cuban journalist Randy Alonso, who hosts the Roundtable national television program, about a meeting that took place at Barcelona's Dulce Hotel on what he calls world government. Other honest writers like him were likewise following the news that somehow was leaked from that strange meeting. Somebody much more informed than them has been on the trail of these events for many years. Now, this is especially funny given what's leaked about like the Dialogue Conference and like the Peter Thiel Secret Society Conference or whatever that kind of came out this week. Like, keep that, and Bilderberg itself, which Peter Thiel goes to, and Alex Karp is a member of. So yeah, keep that in mind. So I was referring to the writer Daniel Estulin, interesting Latvian author, maybe an ex-KGB guy, like interesting conspiracy author. I forget if he was like adjacent to Alex Jones, like maybe like before MAGA, like early 2010s, you know, like when he was still kind of libertarian, like maybe Daniel Estulin would come on and talk about the Illuminati or, you know, Bilderberg, or, you know, or something like that. He's kind of like a slippery, like RT kind of guy. Like I do wonder if he's literally Russian intelligence or something. But you know, Fidel liked his books. So he says, he was referring to the writer Estulin, 475 pages, 20 lines each, were awaiting me for a review of the fantastic story narrated by the above-mentioned author, whether any of the participants in that meeting had dared to deny their presence there or their participation in the events related in his book. The most that can fit into this reflection, capital R, reflection, which I will divide into two parts so that it is not too long. That's Fidel, LOL. He always says, I'm not going to give that long of a speech, and then speaks for like 8 hours.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of a bit he would do. Is the inclusion of a number of paragraphs that I selected to give an idea of the fabulous book entitled Los Secretos del Club Bilderberg, The Secrets of the Bilderberg Club. In the book, Estulin rips to shreds the big gurus, Henry Kissinger, George Osborne, the executives of Goldman Sachs, Robert Zoellick, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, Pascal Lamy, Jean-Claude Trichet, Ana Patricia Botín, the CEOs of Coca-Cola, France Telecom, Telefónica de España, Suez, Siemens, Shell, BP, and other similar politicians and financial tycoons. Estulin starts at the roots. Quote, for an unprecedented 2 Sundays in a row, on The Ed Sullivan Show, over 75 million Americans watched the Beatles shake their heads and sway their bodies in a ritual which was soon to be replicated by hundreds of future rock groups. The man, this is another quote, the man responsible for making the U.S. public, quote, like the Beatles was Walter Lippmann himself. The Beatles, the most parodied and covered group in the history of music, were placed before the U.S. public so that they could be discovered. Enter Theo Adorno is the title of one of the first epigraphs. The response, so, okay, yeah, like, Fidel's being problematic. He's attacking the Frankfurt School. You know, he's doing a little Gabriel Rockhill here, I guess. Another quote, the responsibility of devising a social theory of rock and roll fell to the German sociologist, musicologist, and composer Theodor Adorno, one of the leading philosophers of the Frankfurt School of Social Research. Adorno was sent to the U.S. in 1939 to direct the Princeton Radio Research Project, a joint effort between Tavistock and the Frankfurt School with the aim of controlling the masses, which was financed by the Rockefeller Foundation and founded by one of David Rockefeller's trusted men.
I think the Rockefeller Foundation like heavily funded the Tavistock Institute. That again doesn't like suggest
I can believe
anything,
that.
you know.
They liked medical. They funded a lot of medical things. I mean, Epstein was on the board of Rockefeller University, which is
Tavistock
medical.
is definitely sus. It doesn't, you know, it's not relevant to whether
right.
You know.
And the Princeton Radio Research Project, the Frankfurt schoolers did come over to work on that. That is true. And I'd like to dig a little more into like what exactly were the fine things they were looking at with the radio research.
I don't think that like. I almost feel like the Beatles thing is just like something that like people like felt, you know, like was true, you know, like it felt like that, like, you know, it was called the British invasion and everything. And, you know, like they just kind of had the sense that it was like some kind of op. And then like Tavistock was a natural culprit in the same way that like the CIA, you know, is always behind every, like, you know, we use the CIA as like a metonymy for anything, any kind of, you know, agency like that or any kind of government associated group, right? So
sure. Though I'm not sure when this is all later. This is in 2010 off a book that was probably written in the late 2000s. So I don't know when it was first alleged.
Yeah, exactly. That's you're
that
right.
the Beatles were.
Yeah, this is like repeating that idea that has been around for like a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of like John Birch, like right winger, and certainly I do wonder to what extent Estelin's book was like LaRouche inspired, because some of this sounds like which is controlled by Rockefeller forces, since
definitely.
1948.
There's definitely that vibe to some of the Beatles like stuff.
Estelin has a little bit of a LaRouche like vibe, like a little bit. But I'm not sure if he got like if that's like the LaRouche people were literally the first ones to like make this argument, because LaRouche hated rock music, right? He loved classical music,
right? The Verdi tuning,
it was like
there was
satanic.
Also a problem, exactly. The Verdi
tuning
needed to come back.
So he goes on. He said, it was founded by David Rockefeller's trusted man, Hadley Cantrill. In fact, the Nazis had made intensive use of radio propaganda as an instrument for brainwashing and had transformed it into an integral part of the fascist state. This fact was observed and studied by the Tavistock networks and utilized extensively in its own experiments. The aim of this project, as explained in Adorno's Introduction to the Sociology of Music, was, quote, to program a mass musical culture as a form of mass social control. Now, I mean, maybe Adorno, I feel like Adorno heads would like counter that he's like, no, Adorno's just describing what the Nazis were using it for, but he's like criticizing it. In fact, Adorno he doesn't even like jazz, right?
Yeah,
like he thinks jazz is sus. And I think he thought rock and roll was sus too. Like he wasn't on the record like promoting rock and roll as like epic and socialist. He was like, it all sucks, it's all bad. So it's a little complicated, but anyways, radio stations were converted into machines that recycled the top 40 hits 24 hours per day. The Beatles arrived in the U.S. in February 1964, when the civil rights movement was at its peak. The country was racked by profound national trauma and was recovering from the brutal assassination of John Kennedy. On the streets of the Capitol, the civil rights movement, led by Dr. Martin Luther King, organized a demonstration that was attended by more than 500,000 people. Between 1964 and 1966, the so-called British invasion led to the emergence of a series of British rock singers and groups who became popular in the U.S. and besieged American culture. Toward the end of 1964, it was demonstrated that this English invasion had been well planned and coordinated. These recently created groups and their lifestyles became a new and very visible, quote, type, parentheses, Tavistock jargon, types, I guess. And it was not long before the new styles, clothing, hairstyles, and use of language swept millions of young Americans into the new cult. The youth of the U.S. suffered a radical revolution without being aware of it, and reacted in an incorrect manner against the manifestations of that crisis, namely by using every kind of drug, first marijuana and then lysergic acid, a powerful drug that altered people's state of consciousness. At the MI6, so he's he is like the 60s were sus. Fidel is co-signing. At the MI6 headquarters in London and the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, it can be taken as fact that British intelligence and its affiliate, the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, were directly implicated in a secret investigation to control human behavior. Alan Dulles, director of CIA at the time, when the agency began Project MKUltra, was head of the OSS in Bern, Switzerland, during the initial stage of the Sandoz LSD research. Interesting. In the U.S. and Europe, large outdoor rock concerts were used to halt the growing discontent of the population. The offensive launched by Bilderberg-Tavistock led a whole generation down the yellow brick road of LSD and marijuana. Next section, quote, enter Aldous Huxley. The high priest of the British Opium War was Aldous Huxley, the grandson of Thomas H. Huxley, founder of the Rhodes Roundtable Group, and also the well-known and eloquent biologist who helped Charles Darwin develop his theory of evolution. Toynbee.
Well, now I'm on board.
Toynbee, an Oxford graduate, was the British delegate to the Peace Conference in Paris in 1919. His tutor at Oxford was H.G. Wells, director of British intelligence during World War I and the spiritual father of the Aquarian conspiracy.
You know what? Yes, I have heard about this, and like, there was like, was it Estelin who came up with this? I thought it was someone else.
No, I think there was
'cause,
a book.
I was looking into there was
further
a book
back, further back, called the Aquarian
specifically
Conspiracy.
about the Beatles that because I remember looking into like that tied it into the Aquarian Conspiracy. Yes, that is something that I think is older. Yeah, we had talked about the book. I think
it was a 1980 book by author and futurist Marilyn Ferguson, often referred to as the Bible of the New Age movement, and blah blah blah. Right. So it might have
it was a good thing in that book. Yeah. Like
we broke the Beatles out of the LSD Tavistock lab, and that was a good thing.
Well, that wasn't didn't mention the Beatles. I don't think. I don't think it's the original book, The Aquarian Conspiracy. But there was another book. Hold on, who was it? Like Beatles Tavistock. I'm looking it up because I remember looking into this vaguely before, and that they kind of had blamed the. Yeah, hold on. Let me see.
There's a little more. Actually, hold on. There's more. There's a section about this book in the Fidel article.
Oh yeah, yes. Daniel Estel. It is Daniel Estelin's book, The Tavistock Institute, Social Engineering the Masses, and John Coleman's The Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, Shaping the Moral, Spiritual, and Cultural and Political. So I guess those guys had both. Yeah, because I remember coming across that association with the idea of the Aquarian Conspiracy. Anyway,
right. I probably won't read all of this because he quotes big sections here, which kind of glancingly touch on the Beatles, but he does say that Aldous Huxley was one of the initiates of the Children of the Sun, a Dionysian cult in which the sons and daughters of the British Round Table elite participated. His most famous novel, Brave New World, is a blueprint ordered by several world councils for an authentic... See, this is funny that Fidel is quoting this. For an authentic socialist world under one sole government, or, as his Fabian mentor H.G. Wells said, and is used as the title for his own popular novels, a blueprint for the New World Order. In Brave New World, Huxley focused on the scientific method for keeping all populations outside of the minority elite in an almost permanent state of submission and enamored of their chains. The tools used to achieve this were certain vaccines that altered brain function and medicines which the state forced the population to consume. In Wells' opinion, this was not a conspiracy, but rather a world brain working as mind police. In 1937, Huxley moved to California, where he worked as a scriptwriter for MGM, Warner Brothers, and Walt Disney, thanks to one of his contacts in L.A., Jacob Zeitlin. Bugsy Siegel, the West Coast boss of Meyer Lansky's Mafia outfit, had long-standing ties with Warner Brothers and MGM. In fact, show business, production, distribution, marketing, and publicity is under the control of a mafia that arises from the union of organized crime and high-level Wall Street conmen who are ultimately controlled by the all-powerful Bilderberg. Show business is designed in the same way as any other business line of Bilderberg and his henchmen. It's funny you're talking about Bilderberg as a person, but it's a council.
Yeah, I don't know.
Might be overhyping it a little bit. So of course, Huxley did The Doors of Perception, the first psychedelic book in 1954, and blah, blah, blah. He predicted that democracies would change their essence. The old and strange traditions, elections, parliaments, Supreme Courts would remain, but the substratum below would be non-violent totalitarianism. Meanwhile, the painless concentration camp of the future...
I don't think that there were elections in... Brave New World.
Well, maybe among elites. Well, I guess he's saying what the world would maybe become, even beyond the book.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, he was let's see. He was an MIT professor for one semester, but then was fired when he was in that city. He created a circle at Harvard. Then here we go. This gets a little bit sus. The public subject of that circle or seminar was religion and its significance in the modern world. In an article published in the Campaigner magazine, folks, that's a LaRouche magazine. That is a National Caucus of Labor Committees magazine.
Right,
Michael Minicino affirms in the Campaigner, during his time at Harvard, Huxley made contact with the president of Sandoz, who, in his turn, was working on a CIA assignment to produce large quantities of LSD and psilocybin for MK Ultra, the official blah, 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 chemical warfare, using humans as guinea pigs. McGill Institute, which is also linked to, Bilderberg. Of course, a big LaRouche bugbear, John Rees, a degenerate fascist from Tavistock, utilized as subjects children from national orphanages, whom they tortured and then supplied with various doses of LSD. Blah, blah, blah. We all know about this shit. That is true. They talk about SDS. Most people, protesting the Vietnam War or in SDS. But once trapped in the atmosphere created by the psychological warfare experts at Tavistock and inundated with the message that hedonism and defense of the country was a legitimate alternative to the immoral war, their scale of values and their creative potential dissipated in a cloud of hashish smoke.
God.
Then creating the counterculture, the open cultural war, although undeclared, against U.S. youth. I'm just going to start reading in a LaRouche voice.
I like that he called it hashish.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah.
The undeclared war against U.S. youth began in earnest in 1967 when the Bilderberg members, in order to secure their objectives, began organizing open-air concerts like Woodstock. Through this secret weapon, they succeeded in attracting more than 4 million young people to the so-called festivals. The festies, yeah. Without knowing it, the youth became victims of a perfectly planned experiment with drugs on a grand scale. Hallucinogenic drugs, whose consumption was advocated by the Beatles, were freely distributed at these concerts. Within a short space of time, more than 50 million of those who attended returned home converted into messengers and promoters of the new drug culture who would end up being what would end up being known as the New Age. The largest concert of all time, Woodstock, was described by Time magazine as an Aquarius festival and the greatest show in history. At Woodstock, nearly 500,000 youth gathered to be drugged and brainwashed on a farm. The victims were isolated. And I just love thinking about Fidel, sitting there stroking his beard, being like, interesting. Kept awake continuously for... Actually, the way they describe it is funny. The victims were isolated, immersed in filth, pumped with psychedelic drugs, and kept awake continuously for 3 straight days, and all with the full complicity of the FBI and government officials. Security for the concert was provided by a hippie commune trained in the mass distribution of LSD. Once again, it would be the networks of British military intelligence which would be the initiators, with CIA help via its ex-director William Casey and his contacts with Sefton Delmer of MI6, whose contact Bruce Lockhart was the MI6 controller of Lenin and Trotsky during the Bolshevik Revolution.
What?
Once again, Castro,
weird,
hold on, Fidel, what are we this is, do you not see what's going on here a little bit? This is you're not, you can see the LaRouche shining through. Now here we go. Aquarian conspiracy. In the spring of 1980, Lyndon LaRouche writes in Dope Inc., a book titled The Aquarian Conspiracy became famous overnight as a manifesto of the counterculture. The book affirmed that the hour had come for the 15 million U.S. members of the counterculture to join together to provoke radical change in the U.S. In fact, this book was the first publication directed at society as a whole, which backed the concept of teamwork, a concept that was held to be the most virtuous... I'm not sure if that's true. The most virtuous and was rapidly promoted by the management, quote, gurus. The writer Marilyn Ferguson affirms, quote, while a still untitled book outlined the newly emerging social alternatives, I thought about the particular form of this movement, about its atypical leadership, and the patient intensity of its followers, about their improbable successes. At a conference in 1961, Aldous Huxley described this police state as the final revolution, a dictatorship without tears, in which the people love their chains.
Okay.
Zbigniew Brzezinski, National Security Advisor to President Carter, a founding member of the Trilateral Committee and member of Bilderberg and CFR, expresses identical ideas in his book Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, which was written in 1970. Without using violent repression, they designed a complex combination of actions to obtain a peaceful citizen for the New World Order. They also supported new concepts like emotional intelligence, which is the capacity to love oneself and adequately relate with others. A third way for converting this industrial citizen into a peaceful citizen is a grand marketing campaign to unleash an immense social recognition for collaborators with NGOs, as I explained in my first book, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. Once softened up the United States, it was ripe for the introduction of drugs, especially cocaine, crack, and heroin, and the beginning of an era that would rival prohibition with the enormous sums of money accumulated. Interesting. It is worth mentioning that sections of the 3,000 pages of recommendations given to the newly elected Ronald Reagan by the CFR in January 1981 were based on material taken from the report Changing Images of Man by Willis Harman. I forgot he was one of the main authors of Changing Images of Man. Under a full moon, December 8th, 1980, John Lennon was murdered by a man named Mark Chapman. It is unlikely that one day we will come to know if Mark Chapman was a victim of an artificially induced model psychosis, a killer in the style of the Manchurian Candidate, sent by the Tavistock, CIA, and MI6 to silence a Lennon who was revealing himself as constantly more difficult to control. The next chapter is Perfect Brainwashing Machine, MTV. It goes into some like the sussness of MTV from the very beginning, but I guess that's not really relevant to the Beatles itself. The new age will be a dark age. It will signify the premature death of a little more than half of the population and the deliberate oblivion of humanity's greatest achievements. This is the totalitarian ideology proposed by the New World Order, determined to rule the world, even if it is over our corpses. Wow. Yeah. And then I love the next one. How and why the Bilderberg organized the war in Kosovo. And after that, Kosovo and heroin is the final part. You know what? You might have been onto something there. I'm just going to leave it at that. But then there's more about drug trafficking in the next article. The ghost of Travis. I don't know. There's some weird person named Travis. The war in Afghanistan.
Travis Stock Institute.
How the Bilderbergs created the Yom Kippur War with the objective of internationalizing oil, matrix, databases, and total informational awareness. Then it does eventually get to, it touches on blah, 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 like connections with, I don't know, the Bilderberg Group in Tavistock. And then there's a bio part about Daniel Estulin where Fidel says that finally he dedicates 8.5 pages to the memory of his grandfather. I guess his grandfather was, let me see, he was a soldier among soldiers. He spent 25 years defending the Tsarist Empire. My grandfather continued the military tradition of the family. He took part in the capital R Revolution, the Russian Civil War, and 2 world wars. While he was defending Minsk in the initial weeks of World War II, his whole family, 11 brothers and sisters, his father, mother, and grandmother were exterminated by the Nazis in Crimea. He really lived a life. So he kind of comes from a patriotic Soviet stock, I guess, overall. And then he says, the Second World War, as I demonstrate in this book, and as I've amply revealed in my first book on the Bilderberg Club, was astutely financed by the Rockefellers, the Loebs, and the Warburgs. Prince Bernhard, founding member of the Bilderberg Club, was also implicated. He was a Nazi. Most members of the British royal family were in sympathy with the Nazis, as was a large part of the, quote, liberal East Coast establishment of the U.S., the plutocratic network which dominates the economic, political, and social life of that country. Hitler the Beast was created by the same people who today secretly attend the meetings of the Bilderberg Club, the CFR, and the Trilateral Commission. History for these people is a blank chalkboard on which to defecate against the anguish of others. Can I be blamed for so much despising Bilderberg and his counterparts? In my case, my grandfather continues being my cornerstone, travel companion, including after his death. He is as absent as he is present. Today, I guess the final part, Fidel says, in the second part of this reflection, I've compiled the large quantity of the final lines of his book. They explain his contempt for the odious institution of the Bilderberg Club. It is terrible to think that the intelligences and sentiments of children and youth in the United States are mutilated in that way. Today, we have to fight to avoid being led into a nuclear holocaust and to restore as much as possible their physical and mental health and to think and plan the ways in which human beings can be liberated forever from such a terrible fate. Fidel Castro Ruz, August 18th, 2010, 5:54 p.m. And
wow, exact time.
I agree with him. I agree. We have to. Everyone whose brain has been poisoned by the Beatles.
Yeah, we do.
Needs to be saved.
We have to liberate them.
That's what Fidel wanted for us. That's our mission.
Yeah, that is the promise. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. They're obviously very heavily, I think, LaRouche inflected on. It almost sounds like Estulin is basing an entire book off of Executive Intelligence Review and old campaigner articles and like Lyndon LaRouche publications of that era. And it seems to take them pretty much at like face value that this is like, yep, that's it. So I wish it weren't so, because I would be much more like jazzed about like,
Yeah,
let's get into it. But
actual idea.
that might be our
Right.
only source when we actually do get around to it, of reading about why the Beatles specifically are, and the British invasion bands were some kind of like British soft power operation. It sounds like to sort of lure everybody into like getting into MK Ultra drugs on a mass scale. Like having these bands be kind of the focal point around which that culture would organize itself and flourish.
Yeah,
But
I
don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna be. I feel like the sort of specific Tavistock thing, we might just end up finding stuff of that nature, but we'll see. I'm sure that there's something to be dredged up there. I deeply feel that the Beatles are sus, regardless of
Even if they wrote their own music.
How sus? Yeah, they wrote their own music, and their own music is sus.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they could be totally a legit band, and still Ed Sullivan really, like, these Walter Lippmann, all these people went way out of their way to like really make sure the Beatles like blew up. That
I would
Beatlemania
like to
happened.
read Walter Lippmann's book Public Opinion. I never actually have read it because it's like so dated, or it's considered to be like so dated, or it was written such a long time ago. Although I feel like it probably isn't as dated as people suggest, and I never have. That could be an interesting episode, one about him.
Yeah,
maybe that
definitely.
could tie into the sus Beatles in some way. I'm sure we would get I'm sure that we would get a lot of eyes on that one, the Beatles.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That
Though
might be
we'd have
might be
to-
the most outrage-inducing episode since The Simpsons.
Right.
Yeah.
We might have to go behind the paywall if we want to play those epic Beatles
Yeah,
songs, which
right.
we probably want to do, because how else are we going to evaluate? How else are we going to get across? I mean, it's weird because most people have probably heard most of these.
Yeah.
More than any other band ever. Like these songs are so ubiquitous that but maybe there's some weird deep cuts of various
It's
stuff.
like weird that you can't we couldn't even like play part of it and like discuss it. Like it's even if it's like clearly transformative, I mean, it's not the end of the world. Like we won't get taken down if we like play snippets of a song and like stop and discuss it.
Yeah, the tricky thing is you never know where the line is. A lot
It's
of
so
what
ridiculous. It's just robots doing this stuff. I mean,
a lot of
sorry,
people will
brilliant
speed it
AI.
up or slow it down or play like a cover rendition of it.
Yeah.
To like that guy in the video was playing like a sort of karaoke version of a Beatles song, so that it wouldn't it was not the same recording, so it wouldn't get flagged by Apple Records or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
But yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll come back around.
Like,
that
hello,
soon.
fair use exists. Like, if it's transformative,
I know.
we're not just using it to like, you listening to the show so that you can hear the Beatles songs.
Illegally.
Yeah.
Illegally. Oh, play them backwards. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
who
could
knows
do
what we
chop
if we
and
play them
screwed.
backwards.
Chop and
Yeah.
screwed Beatles.
Here's to my sweet Satan. Well, hey, Paul is a dead man was backwards, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Miss him.
Miss him. Yeah, we could do some real backmasking investigations on the Beatles
Yeah.
too. That'll be good.
Yeah. Did they like do any backmasking like experiments? the
I don't know if
Beatles?
they like consciously or like admitted to doing it. Maybe we'd have to look. Yeah, but anyways, we should probably move on to our second
The
question.
first mainstream song to use backmasking was Rain. Well, wait, this is the AI overview. Sorry. I can't help it because
Yeah,
I Google and like the first one that comes up is this stupid little AI overview. Backmasking is rhetorical, blah, blah, blah. The backwards playing of records was advised as training for magicians by occultist Aleister Crowley, who suggested it in his 1913
Oh
book
my
Magic Before.
God, no!
Yeah.
Jesus.
The
Every
Beatles were
time.
involved in the spread of backmasking as recorded. It's true, yeah. But they did, do it. Rain was the first Beatles song to feature a backmasked message. Sunshine, rain. When rain comes, they run and hide their heads. What?
What album was that on? The White Album?
I'm listening to it right now. No! It's horrible.
Wow, they did it.
It's,
Oh
they,
my God,
They,
that
they
I
did
actually
hide
don't.
backwards music in their songs.
That's one of the
so-
few Beatles songs I'm not familiar with. Actually,
Wow.
Rain.
Yeah, it's probably why you're not like mind controlled. I wasn't familiar with it until now. Probably we didn't hear it.
Oh, okay.
And that's why we're normal and everyone else is.
Oh, you know why I haven't heard it? It was a B-side off the Paperback Writer single from the Revolver sessions, but it's not on the Revolver album. Yeah, it does have. Yeah, it has the backmasking. But actually, Tomorrow Never Knows, I think also. Well, it has backwards sounds, not backwards talking.
There's no message, but
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. But I always thought Paperback Writer was a lame one. Not a big fan. I don't know why the title pisses me off. Anyways, yeah. So let's jump to our second question here. This is from Dakota Pagoda on October 7th, 2022.
Yes.
Very uneventful day that year. And they asked, was Y2K an op?
Was Y2K an op?
Do you remember Y2K?
Of course,
living
I
through
remember.
It?
I remember it. And I remember like
Me
being,
too.
because people took it seriously. I remember being like a little bit like worried about it.
Yeah.
And then like nothing happened. Like there was nothing to it. Like, they were like, people are taking it seriously. Like it was in the, it was in the news. Like there was like a lot of serious discussion about it.
Some people were like prepping. Some people were taking it very far and like prepping and thinking like all the energy grids were gonna like go down or something.
Yeah.
Other people, I found, I forgot. I do kind of remember seeing this. Like the Best Buy had like stickers that were like, "Remember to turn off your computer on December 31st, like 1999."
I don't think it was an op. I think this is what I think. I mean, maybe there was like some like social engineering like experiments being run around the phenomenon of Y2K, but what I really ultimately think is that like even though like everyone thinks we're like hecking secular, like we're actually like still a deeply religious world, and the United States and the West is still like a deeply religious culture, and like really it goes back to what we were talking about not too long ago in when we did our episode on America Against America, where he was talking about like how Americans are religious but somehow like they are rational about it, like, and it was just like baffling because the idea of religion that it like is sort of at the core of the idea that it needs to be crushed down is like kind of an idea of religion as superstition, right? And that kind of is like what religion is sort of it's a flawed distinction, an imperfect distinction, but it is like there's something to it that kind of like quote unquote organized religion does sort of stop like this proliferation and like just kind of like a endless profusion of different like kind of beliefs about like just like worshiping every little jinn you see, and that's somewhat neither here nor there, but I think really what Y2K was just simple millenarianism, like it was just
it's hard to separate from the fact that it was the millennium.
Exactly.
Turnover.
Like people freaked out and thought the world was going to end in the year 1000, and like it's not a coincidence they did it in the year 2000. You know, like it's definitely not a coincidence. I think that is really the overwhelming factor. Like the reason why, the only thing that truly explains to me, I'm not ruling out some kind of like, like weird stuff or like kind of like ops or like experiments and like social engineering and weird kind of, especially like people monitoring the phenomenon and like, even manipulating it by way of monitoring it, but monitoring it. But yeah, I think that like really like what explains the fact that like nothing happened, but it was taken so seriously is simply that like this was a very important date, and that people have been freaking out about the millennium forever. The millennium has been a thing to freak out about forever, literally.
Yeah, and I guess there were documented errors that did, like, it's not like there weren't any glitches. It's just there was this kind of in a way it was a kind of like secularized like neoliberal millenarianism, like apocalypticism about like the cool new like technological economy is like despite being all new and secular and whatever, like somehow it's going to bring about the apocalypse. Like because it's the millennium, like you can't get away from the kind of that feeling, even if it's confined to like computers. It is funny to think now that people are 25 years later, or whatever. People are trying to build like AI machine gods and like worship them. These Silicon Valley people. It seems like there's much less abandon now or like fear. There's almost like a wanting to embrace like immanentize the AI god. I don't know, whatever. But I didn't really. I'm just looking over like the Wikipedia right now, and I guess there was one particular like writer who kind of popularized this idea of like the year 2000 problem as far back as 1993, and then kind of put it in people's consciousness. I think it was Computer World's 1993 Doomsday 2000 article by Peter de Jager, a South African Canadian computer engineer who wrote a lot of stuff about like he was called the Paul Revere of like the Y2K, the information age equivalent of Paul Revere by the New York Times for sounding the alarm. And there were some early books, I guess, actually going back to the 80s. There was a book called Computers in Crisis, and it was reissued in 1996 called The Year 2000 Computing Crisis. The first recorded mention of it in a Usenet news group is from January 18th, 1985 by Spencer Bowles. And I guess a Massachusetts programmer was the one who coined Y2K, because the other ones were, like CDC, FADL, like didn't really roll off the tongue. It's I found an odd quote here where I guess like the problem was in a lot of early computer systems, because data storage was so expensive, they didn't add the 19 in the date.
Yeah,
and
that was the idea.
It literally would make like storage. It would take up storage space. I found this very odd quote just slipped in the Wikipedia article. Alan Greenspan, 1998. I'm one of the culprits who created this problem. What? Like, I used to write these programs back in the 60s and 70s and was proud of the fact that I was able to squeeze a few elements of space out of my program by not having to put a 19 before the year. Back then, it was very important. We used to spend a lot of time running through various mathematical exercises before we started to write our programs so they could be very clearly delimited with respect to space and the use of capacity. It never entered our minds that those programs would have lasted for more than a few years. As a consequence, they are very poorly documented. If I were to go back and look at some of the programs I wrote 30 years ago, I would have one terribly difficult time working my way through step by step. Yeah, so I guess, this is like kind of a relic of the earliest internet database kind of stuff that, I don't know. I don't know. People did start like stock market brokerages and stuff started like implementing it because they had like contracts and bonds that matured past 2000 going back as far as the 80s. So I guess they had to hire programmers to like figure out a way kind of around it. And I guess, some people did talk about it, but then like it was only kind of leading up to like 98, 99, where there started to be this bubbling up of like a panic, like, oh my God, especially because so many people adopted computers like between, 1995 and 2000. Yeah. And suddenly it felt like, very integral to the economy. Like, what the hell is going to happen? And then, I do remember, I was like just old enough kind of I was probably in middle school, I guess, and maybe like 8th grade. And I do remember like the pop culture and the news like hyping it up for like a year and being like, And I do remember, like, I don't remember most New Year's Eves, but I do have like a vivid memory. I can place myself exactly where I was on January 1st, 2000. Like, I was at my friend's house, and I remember kind of half jokingly looking out the window at the hills, and the kind of the light from like the inner Bay Area
thinking,
was
like everything would go dark
as the countdown on the TV in New York was like happening, or maybe it wasn't New York at that point, but they were counting down. I'm just gonna watch the sky, keep my eye on the sky just in case. And then it was 2000, and nothing happened, and we all joked about it.
What's really funny is like, I grew up in New York, and so my parents like took me to Times Square, and like, and my parents, I remember them saying like, it's because, for the rest of your life, everyone's going to ask you, where were you for the year 2000? It's like, well, that got blown out of the water, like not too long after.
Yeah, right. There's going to be a different question of where were you in New York on.
Yeah, exactly.
Oops.
Yeah.
It's funny how there was a delayed, like, the Y2K thing almost gets everybody hyped up, and then
like, well, actually, because there was no year zero, right? So I remember like as soon as Y2K didn't happen, because like by this time I was like already like all up in the conspiracy paranormal like world, and like with cryptozoology and UFOs and stuff. Like this was like when I was in middle school, so it was like my jam. Like, and. Like all immediately people like because obviously there was no year zero, right? There was no year zero AD. There's just the first, right? So the real millennium is 2001. So then people started freaking out over 2001, and I guess they were right to in terms of the U.S. anyway.
It came. It came.
How interesting. That's that's another aspect of the Dracularity to it, right? I mean, I remember part of the reason that I sort of in that paper I wrote like way back, a conference paper, where I devised the idea of Dracularity related to 9/11. It was because of that awful like B movie Dracula 2000,
right,
also known as Dracula 2001 in some countries, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Which that even puts it closer to the date. Isn't there a thing where like, the characters have like camcorders, and like you can see Dracula on the camcorder, but he's like invisible?
Yeah, he's invisible on the camcorder, right?
Oh,
so,
right.
Like you can that's like it's kind of like a representation of Dracularity, right? Where like there's this force that like all these like media technologies like are unable to perceive, but it's still like acting, and is able to like, kill and destroy, but can't be seen by these cameras. Yeah. And in fact, like, the sort of the mysterious Whitby Bay, I think I've said this on the show before, but the mysterious sort of Whitby Bay, ship, right? The Demeter in that movie is a plane that crashes in like the Florida Everglades.
Right. Yeah. It's a plane that crashes like very Flight 93.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. But yeah, that was the Y2K was kind of the false apocalypse, and then its kind of enduring legacy was leading up to it, and then a couple years after. Like now, when we talk about that era of like fashion and music, it's like a thing now. Like young Gen Z like loves Y2K stuff. Like there's an entire Y2K like thrift store in Echo Park now that's just like Y2K clothing. Like if you go to Berlin, it's like Y2K store. Like and stuff.
It's funny, like,
until recently was not actually cool. It was that was like an embarrassing part for millennials.
So embarrassing, but now like I can see the nostalgia for it in a way. Like those hats.
Yeah, the bucket hats. The bucket hat, like big baggy jeans are back.
Right, yeah.
That kind of PS2 like neon green kind of like aesthetic, like type of font and aesthetic. Yeah, like the because people look back now and it feels like, wow, what a like amazing era where nothing was going wrong. Like basically the time kind of right up to like 9/11 and maybe a little maybe 2002 as well. But there was a long millennium kind of like cultural moment there where it was like, oh yeah, Y2K didn't destroy everything. Things seem chill, cool, like end of history. Rock on, let's play video games and skateboard and just whatever. Like MTV's going to go on forever, and the internet's just going to keep doing cool stuff. And then it started to take, but now everyone's like nostalgia. People that didn't directly experience it have a kind of nostalgia or an attraction to it that it's like me. Like, am I ever going to wear like big baggy like I don't know, like FUBU jeans again in my life? Like, no, like
my brother, like he still like kind of wears, because he actually has like kind of a a normie type of job, and he like told me one time that he will wear like like what was considered stylish, or when we were kind of growing up, right? Like kind of like skinny, like a very sort of slim fit type of clothes, and like his, sort of younger coworkers are like, I can tell that you're an older millennial, because like I would. Like, he saw like one of his like coworkers one time like wearing like these baggy like clothes to work, and he was like, I would never wear that to work, and he was like, I would never wear what you're wearing to work, like I can tell you're an elder millennial like because of what you wear, No,
it is funny, they always said the skinny jeans like they sort of coincided, or part of the responsibility was like the iPod and the iPhone coming out, like because remember in 1999 you had to carry around a CD like a Discman that was like big, so the pockets were hella big,
right?
And you could put like a Walkman or a Discman in your big pocket. But now then you just need a little slim thing, and then phones got smaller, so then everybody got skinny jean pilled. But now, and then like high waisted jeans came in, but now low waisted jeans, like Britney Spears low waist jeans are back, and like bare midriffs and stuff are back, but also like really big like kind of like rap metal like pants. Like it's just it is interesting. You definitely I thought like I could mostly spot like who's like a zoomer and who's a millennial by who's wearing like really really baggy like Y2K outfits, and it's it's like a subtle, not sure like why there's like a cutoff, but I think we probably still associate it with like, I don't know, kind of like
I think it's
a
like
chud
it's
era
like
that we want to like distance ourselves from.
I mean, I also just feel like we're old now, and like it's kind of the same reason why like there's such a thing as like grandma like it's weird to like dress like it's like, how do you do, fellow kids? Like this is what we wear. This is what old people wear. We wear skinny jeans.
You get locked in a fashion and you just ride it out.
Well, it's kind of like, are we gonna like pretend like that we're like young hip people, like we're gonna wear like the latest fashions? It's like weird. Like I haven't bought new clothes in so long. Like I probably should. Like, but yeah, like so I'm just wearing what I'm wearing. It's like this is how it's gonna be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, was Y2K an op? I mean, I'm sure it was kind of written. I mean, We Live in Public is an example of somebody taking advantage of that millenarian like frenzy to do a weird like MK Ultra internet experiment for strange reasons. That's wouldn't say the whole thing maybe was I mean, people sold books off of it. It was like a hot, fun topic like to sort of get scared about, because there were always people saying like, calm down, like it's not that it's not gonna be that bad. So it was kind of a fun thing to be like, oh no, like we're all gonna like die, but you kind of knew you weren't gonna die.
It was kind of like 2012 too.
It was like, oh, Mayan apocalypse, like but like then you kind of know it's not gonna happen, so it's fine. But then I don't know. But I don't know. I think it was a genuine like technical issue that they had to like hire programmers to like iron out, but that they mostly did. And so in that sense, I don't think it was like an op, and that it was like a made up thing to like cause hysteria. I think there's definitely like amping up of hysteria for various reasons.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like some kind of like like I could see like them running like kind of like experiments on that, or like kind of studies on like people, like I could see there be like government funded or like agency funded like studies of
maybe
the
war games
phenomena.
Of like what happened if like this happened,
and like especially with what happened a year later, like there were parallels, not like it was kind of this weird sort of like premonition of this like cataclysmic paradigm shifting epical event,
which would indeed come like a little less than 2 years later.
Exactly.
Oof. Yeah. So we have a little bit of time left. I think we could like we could talk a little bit about this third question.
Okay. Yeah.
If you want to read that from Aunt Serena.
Okay, hold on, let me open up the workflow over here. All right, Aunt Serena. Aunt Serena. Okay. On October 13th, 2022. SJ question. What do you guys make of Peter Levenda's interview on Nick Bryant's podcast, specifically the end of part 2 when they discuss Levenda's relationship with Michael Aquino? Yeah, I mean, this is not an of the moment podcast episode now, but I did actually listen to this.
I did too. I did the whole thing like twice.
All
actually.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like I had a lot of issues with it. Like some of the things that like Peter Levenda said, like I thought like maybe were like fair enough in some ways, but I also felt like one of the things that like jumped out at me was like his like kind of just like staunch disbelief in the phenomenon of ritual abuse.
Oh yeah,
and
he really goes to the mat on that, and
yeah,
so like splits hairs about it with Nick Bryant, who's just trying to get him to like say that like it is something that some people do. He's like, okay, well, if we're gonna get into a whole global cabal theory, and he's like, I'm not doing that. Like
weird.
I'm not doing
exactly.
that. Like this isn't like, a QAnon thing. He says at one point.
Right. I think that the phrase like ritual abuse or satanic ritual abuse triggered him and made him think like, oh, you're talking about, you know, a cabal that's like harvesting adrenochrome. I mean, the like abuse, you know, obviously like this is like kind of, again, this is another good you know, use for religion, because like I think it gives like a little bit of clarity about like when we're talking about like, you know, objective moral principles and we're talking about those that are relative. You know, it's weird that I feel like not having that in some way, like you think that like, you know, it would just having a concept of like a objective moral principle would just mystify everything. But I almost feel like, for me at least, I feel like I have more clarity than someone like Peter Levenda about the fact that something like abuse is relative, right? That's like the thing. Like he is right that, as we've said many on the show many times, like people who like see themselves as like evil are like relatively rare. There are like some who like, you know, of course there's the bad phenomenon, but that is like kind of like you know, I reject your morality and like the true morality is my own. Like that is not really the same as like identifying as I am abusive, right? If you want to find someone who says like you know, I am abusing children for ritual purposes, that is going to be uncommon. But like you know, not to say, but like, you know, who identifies it as abuse, someone who says I am using children in rituals, that is absolutely ubiquitous, and it's not just limited to the occult either.
Which he almost does kind of make
the circumcision,
right?
Like,
well, I think he even makes that distinction at one point. He's like, well, if you're talking about the use of children in rituals, and he says like, well, you know, even Catholics do that, which is true, like altar boys and stuff, like. Yeah, like, you know, of like all kinds of like main religions like utilize children in rituals and stuff like that. But he was also talking about like Wiccan kind of stuff, and he throws out the example of like there was some Wiccan couple or authors or whatever like some years back, maybe in the UK, that published this book about Wiccan rituals, and they talked about using like their daughter for a ritual that involved like penetrating her with some kind of like, you know, wand, like sacred device or something as like a part of the ritual. And like they were completely like, everyone was like, what the fuck, like, and like canceled them, and we're like, yo, we don't want. So but then it's like Levenda says, see, like, so that proves that everyone who does magic like thinks that's disgusting, and that was just like, you know, one aberration where somebody did admit to doing it, and they got totally excoriated and like ostracized, as they, you know, should be. So therefore it's like almost absolutely everybody who does magic like would. But I was kind of like, I don't know, like you're kind of not allowing for people that are, I don't know, not stupid, that like you shouldn't admit to something like that because it's illegal and everyone will hate you. Like obviously if like hypothetically if somebody is doing something like that, as pedophiles, like regular non-ritual pedophiles do, all like they know that it's a crime, and that and it will be judged by society as such, and so they hide it. Like, and so you would imagine the same dynamic could be going on with a ritual, or a group of Catholic priests that are molesting. Like, they're gonna hide it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like things. Yeah, and like there probably are like instances. I mean, I think in the Catholic context, like usually it simply is like abuse, but there may be instances where it does have a ritual component. But in terms of like ritual and like magical or whatever you want to call it, like let's just say like ritual. We're talking about two things that historically speaking are like incredibly relative. Like, what is a like child, right? What is like we're talking many things that are incredibly relative: consent, childhood, and abuse. Right.
Okay.
Like
yeah.
our modern concept of like what is like in ancient Greece, like
you mean relative in the sense of like a nun would beat the crap out of a kid in like the 1950s in Catholic school, and parents would be like, oh, thank you. Like, that's what you should be doing. And
exactly,
I mean, even
the
South today,
child.
People still spank their kids with paddles and stuff. Yeah.
Or like in ancient Greece where like pederasty was like a key aspect of like, philosophical love, right? Like that like in this like today, like that kind of relationship might be seen as like being abusive. But back then it wasn't. It was seen as like part of like the highest pursuit of wisdom, right? And like so, we're talking about like values that can like this is what a point I'm making about like moral principles that are objective. Like we have those, we recognize at the level of the dunya, like in this world, people's values like are not all the same, right? They are different. And like so we have like many attested examples of like sex magic, right, in the occult. And we have many examples of like the occult, like children being involved in occult practices. To say that it is like impossible and ridiculous that like those two things would overlap, like like Anton LaVey, like, his kids were like satanically baptized. Like they were, child baptism. That was actually controversial, right? Like during the Reformation and stuff, right?
Right.
It became, it's like, the children, like it shouldn't be baptized, it should be adult baptism, right? Like, so even this is like kind of something.
Yeah, that's child abuse. Catholics, like me getting put in a robe, in a gown, and like dunked in a tank, like by another man in a robe is a child abuse.
It was like kind of like it. I didn't like it.
How old were you? I mean, I was a baby when it happened.
I was a little bit older. I couldn't have been like, I think I was either between 2 or 3, but I do have some like, especially involving things like that, like sudden shocks. I have like early memories of those things. And that's exactly what it was. I had no idea what was going to happen.
Right.
I was.
I feel
it was
like
literally
like 3 or 4. It's like it's like terrifying. Like it's like just swinging the incense around you and shit. Like, anointing you with weird oils. Like. Yeah, but that's why that's why they get the babies in, because the babies have no idea what's happening.
Dunking me, and like then I was just like dripping wet, and I was like, ugh, like I had no idea what was gonna happen.
Well, that's so. Some people would say that's kind of like child abuse, or sending your kid to Jesus camp to learn how to like have Pentecostal channeling of the spirits or something. Like you could go down the list of like, but yeah, he's very defensive, Lavenda, about like the idea that this is even a marginal phenomenon in the occultist community worldwide, and that the idea of like human sacrifice, I think he said like, well, you have to be like a really powerful spiritual person to be able to like handle that kind of experience without like destroying yourself, or something like he kind of was trying to say.
I've never met anyone who's powerful and good enough at magic to like make it work or something, right?
And I mean, I hate to like I don't want to just single out this region, but like I know that it happened here, but like go listen to my shit about like Liberia and the start of the Civil War in the 90s. Like it was always a marginal thing in the spiritual practices of certain societies, like in Africa, but also other places too throughout history. But there's more modern documentation.
Sacrifices attested all over the world.
Like I know this is the kind of the hackiest like example, because like Vice is always like cover this and they kind of snicker about it, but like General Butt Naked, the rebel, one of the factional commanders in the first Liberian Civil War, claimed that he used to sacrifice a child like before they would go into every time they would go into battle, and he claimed to have sacrificed like 5,000 children. Now he's like an evangelical pastor now who has renounced his past thing, but like there's more than enough documented evidence that like various commanders like engaged in ritual cannibalism for like very specific like magical purposes, like to not get hit with a bullet in battle or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and that there were beliefs that like if you eat the heart of like your enemy, you'll like absorb some of their like power and like blah blah. There were, you know, well publicized murders even before that in the 70s of local politicians in Liberia who were educated, had master's degrees from American universities. They were like Americo-Liberian like bourgeois basically, but they had kidnapped a local singer and ritually sacrificed him so that one of them could like win election to like the House of Representatives or something, like to get like a political, to like help their political career, you know? And like, you know, and again, that's like not to single them. So if they're doing it, like I think that's almost a little bit a little racist to be like, oh, white people in the West, like,
I mean,
who
whether
are
the bog body
immersed in sacrificial occult shit would never have this notion that they can sacrifice somebody for power.
It's the very idea of animal sacrifice, which is widely we Eid al-Adha we just had not too long ago, you know, which commemorates the sacrifice of Abraham, right? Right, like that story. I mean, it's kind of obvious what that story is about. Like historically, it's about like the end of, or like
humans used to be sacrificing, like their children and stuff, and then God was like, "You don't have to do that anymore."
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like the you know a lot of the Mesoamerican civilizations, not all of them, but some of the most powerful ones. Like I saw some of those sites in Mexico, around Mexico City, like Teotihuacan, and like. They were sacrificing people, folks.
Totally.
Like, I mean,
it
was what they were doing, you know, and they had, you know, like a big altar, you know, on top of like halfway up the temple that where like everyone could see it, you know, and in the same way, you know, the American West would have public hangings of bad guys, which is, you know, it's almost like a civic ritual in a way, but like it's, you know, think about the Molly Maguires being like hung. And like the kind of ritual statement of like publicly hanging them, you know, and all this kind of stuff. Like there's,
I mean, like
it's not crazy to think they would combine maybe some of these ideas together. Like
there's an amazing play by I just did a teaching demo about this for a job that I didn't get. Maybe I shouldn't have picked this topic, but she was a Criolla writer, nun, Hieronymite nun, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. And she has this a play, which is like a Loa, part of like a Corpus Christi festival. And the whole point of this is basically like, you know, she does have kind of like the beginnings of kind of like a mestizaje, like kind of identity, you know, kind of a Criolla consciousness. And, you know, so she kind of like sees the Aztecs as like, she has a sort of sympathy for them, even though she also has this kind of, you know, bigoted, you know, Christian sort of supremacist view, right? And of course, really, like, you know, it's part of it is fair enough because it's just this disgust for the practice of human sacrifice. But she also kind of makes this allegory between what they were doing and like what like Catholics believe in. Like like, you know, she describes this ritual
this is
you
the
know,
body and blood, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like she describes this ritual where like, you know, human blood would be used. Again, this might not be accurate to Aztec practices, like, you know, who knows if these sort of cookies were chronicles how accurate they were, but like rituals like this certainly did exist. And you know, like human blood would be used to make this kind of effigy out of what's the amaranth, right? Like an effigy of Huitzilopochtli, Pochtli, I think it is. You know, I think that was the deity, but like you know, of these amaranths, these are human blood, and then like this would be distributed to all the barrios in the community. And like she would say, this is like, you know, the same, like we also have a God who, like, you know, feeds us, like allows us to eat him, like to eat his blood and like his body, right? So like this idea is like, you know, not
it's a loaded
like
concept.
Huge leap.
Yeah,
it's like a big part of human civilization.
Right.
Yeah.
And the sacrificing, like I was just reminded from the chat who said Ustasha, obviously. And if you listen to the I understand, hard to listen to, I think part maybe 3 of the last run of Demon Forces about Ustasha war crimes in Serbia, like even though nominally they were hyper nationalistic Roman Catholics, the testimonies from some of like the concentration camps, like they were mass taking like Serbs and slitting their throats over a gigantic vat, like a urn. And then like somebody asked what they were doing. They're like, we're giving like vats full of Serb blood to the Poglavnik for his birthday. And like shit. And then like Ante Pavlovich, like one time, like an Italian journalist was like in his office and he saw this like basket and with these little like, he thought were oysters. And he's like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's a present from my loyal Ustashas. 1,000 pounds of Serb eyes. It's like, what the fuck? Like, what? Like, you know, that's like the level. I mean, people do shit like that. Like, you know, and it's like, so even if they didn't like explicitly think that this is like a magical, a cult, like that's some like weird satanic, like will to power, like type action. And it is ritualistically like filling vats of blood to give to your leader to like show him how much like blood of the enemy you have spilled, like, and so he can what, like bathe in it. Like, I don't like, you know, it's like it runs up against the line of like, it's not that hard of a leap, right? Like you said, to think that some people somewhere might be doing this. And that, you know, Nick Bryant brings up one modern example of, I think it was, what is it, the Matamoros murder down by the Mexican border in the late 80s, where American
and he's like, well,
student,
they were drug dealers, like irrelevant,
right? Like that's what, and he even
like drug dealers are fundamentally like, well, they're not. Like, there's plenty of drug dealers who just deal drugs. You
like
know,
Lavenda
they don't, like, do like a you know, rituals.
Like Lavenda even brings up, like he does say, like, well, you know, Michael Aquino, he was in the Phoenix program, and it's like, yeah, dude, like. At what point do you think that, like, just because it has like a context like drug dealing or counterinsurgency program, that it doesn't still have like, if it involves murdering people to establish objectives of like power or something like that, then I don't know. It's like not that far off. And especially, you know, if somebody has experience doing something like that, like Aquino did, of probably killing lots of people, and then coming, you know, back to America and getting involved in these satanic churches. Like, it's funny what Lavenda disapproves of Michael Aquino for. Like, what he cancels him for. He's pretty adamant that he believes in the extreme prejudice theory. He thinks he loved Nazis too much, and that was sus. Fair enough. And the fact that he was like in the Phoenix program, kind of sus. But he doesn't believe in the Presidio abuse thing, and him and Nick Bryant kind of get into it. And you know, I would side with like Nick Bryant's POV. I mean, Lavenda had no answer to the like, why did 5 children at the daycare center have chlamydia? You know, which was documented. Why did that little girl who ran into Michael Aquino on the base and freaked out, and they took her to Aquino's ancestral home in San Francisco, and she had correctly identified, you know, certain items in rooms and things like that.
He argued that like she actually was wrong and wasn't right, and that's like
that's
false.
what Aquino told Lavenda, apparently. Which I'd have to double check. But he, I mean, it's like obviously like that is like murky, but it's like kind of like I wasn't necessarily like persuaded by Lavenda's. It was just basically just the same thing that Aquino said. You know, he obviously seems to be like very much like, you know, like many people who aren't deep in the occult are just very much averse to the whole like the Satanic Panic op worked on him. Where like you know, anything that like has the whiff of like the Satanic Panic, he doesn't want to deal with it at all. Which is funny for a guy who wrote the books like Sinister Forces, which do seem to, at least as Brian said, like they imply that there is some kind of like cosmic sinister force that does exist, and we don't quite understand how it works.
That was a good point of Nick Bryant's. It's like, well, if that exists, then humans are going to want to
interface with
like,
it for power.
Exactly.
So, but I think we have to remember, and I remember this not being like 10 years ago when I first started encountering Lavenda. I feel like this wasn't as foregrounded, that like he is pretty much like an occultist guy. Like he's into this stuff. I think didn't he write the
Simon Necronomicon?
Yes. He did, but that wasn't known for a long time. And then I think there was something in the Pizzagate emails, the Podesta emails, that indicated that he was like working with Tom DeLonge on like UFO type like his like little
maybe.
UFO disclosure stuff, and also maybe that Levin is like a Freemason as well. I forget if that was like totally confirmed, but it would make sense. Like it would make sense, like if he's such an occultist expert. So he has a little bit of like on the one hand, I mean, I'd like to kind of, I know they're like long, but I do think he's like an interesting documenter. Like he talked a lot about the Nine and Andrea Pekarik and Esselin, and I think he like has seemingly done a lot of like really exhaustive research on these kind of milieus. And he does generally think that like a lot of them are connected to intelligence agencies. They're sus, like these are sus people. He does say like he thinks that like the NATO like let Michael Aquino go do a satanic ritual at Wewelsburg Castle in the early 80s when he was working as a NATO attaché. And like what the fuck? Like that's scary. Like why would they allow that? Like are the people high up in the military like Setians or something? Like he doesn't, you know, so it's like up to a point he is kind of like a liberal guy and he thinks this is bad, but he also has a soft spot for like the sincere occultist, like that is just hermetically away, and he doesn't like these kind of satanic panic sounding things that are all about like abusing children. That kind of makes him feel icky, and he doesn't really want to like go there so much, it seems like. From Nick Bryan is pushing him.
It's like basically he's overreacting. Like he kind of has like a straw man of what people are saying, you know. He's got like, it's really the whole thing of like the witch hunt narrative. Like he is like bought into it like hook, line, and sinker, like because it's certainly there are like versions of the satanic panic, or like there certainly is such a thing as a satanic panic, like that is like not you know, doesn't correspond with reality, right?
Oh yeah, it's like a shit coded
like,
version
there
of
are
it.
like versions of like the cabal, like, you know, or whatever, like whatever he was saying was coming up, like that is a thing. But yeah, that's not the only thing. The only way to talk about this as something that like I feel like, I mean, it is like an amazing for someone who claims to be knowledgeable about the occult. Like it is like surprising how, like, to me honestly, like I almost feel like it's weird like how these people have like a very provincial, like I remember like coming across that people saying that like very early on, like when are doing the show, like kind of being dismissive of the idea of human sacrifice as an occult practice and stuff like that. And it's like, it's because they have like this very like provincial occultism, which is basically like post Gerald Gardner, like kind of you know,
love and light, witchy,
you know, like
go in the forest,
or like Thelema stuff, like
maybe a little fun
Thelema.
sex magic, but it's really just kind of being poly with like extra steps or something. Like it's you know, they're kind of like swingers and they do little sex, the tantra, whatever, and you know,
and
they're probably
I probably think even that stuff is more sus than they do but I also feel like, but they're kind of like very like narrow view of the occult, like it kind of like is what blinds them to like the sus aspect of that, or even the possibility, like, you know, a certain like possibilities like of those things, right? They're like, well, human sacrifice, like what? Like it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you know, like, you know, esotericism didn't start in like 1971 or whatever, you know, like
right.
like it's,
well,
like,
I was kind of like joking when I was just in the New Age
and
capital.
None of the founders even said, you know, they always talked about how ancient it was. You know?
Right. But I was just in the New Age capital of probably the country, Sedona, Arizona, last week, and going around. And I think I said jokingly, half jokingly, at a point like, you know, I wonder if there's anybody in Sedona that is sort of focused on like the dark side of all these like amazing spiritual, like mystical forces, the vortexes, the, you know, this and that, like, because everything is just so relentlessly like posy coded there about like love and light and vortexes, and like the ancient Native American tribes knew that this vortex would heal you, and it's like, okay, then why didn't they use it to prevent you from like genociding them and stealing their land? I don't know. Like, there's just like kind of like a very like happy, like everything's great. And like, what if there was a guru who was like there to like protect you from like demonic influences? Like, there might not be one because they'd probably get run out of town for being too like negative, low vibrational, get out of here. You know, like that's why I went to Jerome, Arizona, and in a way, all the sort of like bleh, like bad spiritual energy kind of hangs out there, where they're like, we're haunted, like,
right,
and kind of playing with that, like it's a doomed place, but in those kind of communities, there's such and the Esalen thing, like there's such a resistance to. Even though they're all trying to escape the lower vibrational, the darkness, whatever, that's not New Age. And so, all the bad stuff is outside of the New Age. There's nothing in the New Age spiritual pursuits that could be used for anything bad, or a malign actor could seize upon these amazing techniques, whether it's holotropic breath work or psychedelics or, transcendental meditation or, go down the list of all these different things. It's too much for people that are bought into those milieus to consider what if bad guys use these techniques.
They're really the only ones in the modern day who can have that kind of concept of their religion. I think I've said this before, but every other religion has to deal with the fact that there's
sickos among you.
Yeah, exactly. Muslims are always on the defensive, right? Constantly being called terrorists and toxic to civilization, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But every single Muslim acknowledges Muslims might differ about who the bad Muslims are, but but Muslims always acknowledge that they're that there are bad people in our community, or there are people who disgrace our religion or whatever, right? But for some reason they're the only ones who have to have this catered to, there might be some people in any community who maybe are that, have that kind of naive approach, although I think it's pretty rare and almost impossible, just because they're so on the attack. But somehow through the whole satanic panic thing, and the idea that we all have to operate under, which is it was bullshit, no, there's never been a satanic murder ever, or anything like that, where it's
never.
Really, because all the religions that aren't blah have had murders in
right
the name. So it's kind of if your religion is based on how it's awesome to commit murder and sin, it's kind of weird that there's never been
that you're the only one that doesn't do it
crazy.
Ever.
Yeah.
Come the fuck on. Yeah, there is a weird reverse psychology thing where it's because they're so blah 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 up front, that they're actually cuddly little, actually ethical liberal people that would never do anything bad.
I see what you're saying. Where I wish that they would just admit that there are negative people out there,
I have to say,
working with these energies or whatever, or
I
who
think
are in your community.
That might be, I might be painting with a broad brush, but I feel that might be the biggest distinction between Euro-American, predominantly white, New Ageism, and the kind of shamanic folk practices found that are much older, that are found in regions all around the world. I feel if you went to a witch doctor or something in Africa, or a real what do you call it, ayahuasca spirit guide or whatever in South America, something like that, that the idea of malignant spirits is totally a part of their belief. And in fact, a lot of what those ayahuasca rituals or whatever is to banish, remember we ran into somebody when we were in Siberia. It was a Tuvan person who was talking about how normal it was to hire a shaman when you moved into a new apartment. This is around Irkutsk or whatever in deep Siberia. That was oh yeah, totally normal. Hire a shaman to kind of sage your living place when you move into it, in case they're it's doing a check for bad spirits, and they go in there and do some kind of ritual. So it presupposes that not all spirits are loving, light, they love you. Yes, trust them.
Not only that, but not all spiritual practitioners. We were is that book by the same author as the Demons Are Forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's kind of I think I remember seeing an interesting comment about some of the controversy in Indology. I'm not super in that discipline, but I remember he was kind of a controversial person in that, and we talked a little bit in the Demons Are Forever episode, but he has another book called Sinister Yogis, which I was interested, maybe do an episode on. But but that idea, the idea that like there are like bad spiritual practitioners out there, like that there are bad like or like false Sufis, right? That like so much of Sufi discourse is about like how there are like fraudsters and like fake fake Sufis out there who are like full of hypocrisy and riyah, like they're so like
they're on that subliminal jihad tip like, of being pocket watchers of false gurus.
But
soul
like
watchers.
and like I know that there are like witches who like are like we're the white witches and like but there are black witches out there and like
you're right.
bad,
no, I know
like
that's
that,
true.
but,
they're not all like actually witches are. Like I have to say, like maybe a little better
about it. That like, maybe a little.
Witches
better
are not as in denial as like other types of new agey people because like maybe because of the legacy of like the witch as a. Usually they want to rehabilitate. Like being a witch is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, it can be a really great thing. However, like sure, you could like some witches you could abuse, like just like you could abuse any tool. For bad ends, like there can be bad witches, like they're more about distinguishing that like you can't just throw us all in the bad witch bucket, there's some good, but the new agers, Jesus, like, I was reading about this millennial guy who I think is based in Sedona now. I'm forgetting his name, but he's like Dutch. But he has like a Portuguese name for some reason. He's like a white Dutch guy. And a woman committed suicide during one of his spiritual retreats in like 2018. And he's been accused of being a cult. But he just brushes it off, and he sells these like spiritual kind of masterclass courses online that you can like subscribe to that tell you all the answers about everything and stuff. But he's still kind of trucking, and it's just like, yay, love and light, like I'm amazing, and like I'm like, damn, like you think how do the other people in the community feel about? They must have seen a number of sus grifters come through a place like Sedona since like the 1960s, and so like how do they handle that? It seems like it's kind of like a hushed up, not that different from the Catholic Church really, like just kind of hushing it up to not spoil the love and light industry that exists there and keep everybody vibing and and then they're kind of allowed to keep operating a little bit, and so that kind of shit, it's like like Catholics today, like kind of a little bit like in Islam, where it's like everybody knows about the pedo stuff, all right? Like everybody knows it happened. Like the congregants know it, the priests know it, the Pope knows about. Like everybody is, that's a thing that's associated with the Catholic Church now, and so they have to come up. Now, a lot of Catholics will say like, well, like the priesthood was infiltrated by Satanists. Like I've heard that before.
For sure. Yeah.
But they still acknowledge that like malignant people like posing as holy like vicars of God, as priests, like got themselves into like positions of influence and then use it to abuse children. And like, even in the Catholic Church, like that can happen, but then I'm not seeing the same energy from like New Agers about any number of fucking things. And I don't know, not all of them. Can't chalk it up just to like psychedelic drugs because some of them are on a different trip, like they're into just meditating and being so being sober and enlightened and present, and there's all kinds of shit like that there. But at the same time, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat and wash a brain, so I think that the overemphasis on love and light and the inability. Even among some other occultists, like I don't think Lavenda's a pure love and light guy, but he's got that kind of optimistic, sympathetic view of like witchcraft and occultism that even though he does acknowledge a lot of his work is like, yeah, these powerful people are using it, but for some reason the children, abusing children is like as a I don't. Nick Bryan wasn't
like
saying it was widespread, but he was like triggered as if he was saying it was wide. Like everybody does it.
It's almost is this confusion between like is this like the truth of your? I do feel like it almost comes from like like bad I don't want to call it theology necessarily because I don't know if I don't know if Peter Lavenda believes in like a deity or like what his beliefs are. Like he gave me like kind of atheist vibes. I feel like I feel like part of it is like not taking your religion seriously because like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can make a distinction between, right, like this whole thing of like, you know, the church was infiltrated by Satanists or like whatever, you know, like it's like, okay, like that did happen, right? This institution is flawed, but they were like not, you know, like they're not like in accordance with how we're supposed to be practicing our religion, right?
No,
the same thing as like,
exactly.
oh, you know, like, you know, yeah, like they are Muslim sociologically, right?
Yeah.
Like, but they are not like actually, you know, like their actions are not actions that Allah would approve of, right?
Right.
Like that's
right.
like this is not actually what God wants. Right, so that's like different. Like, yeah, they're Muslim insofar as they like profess a shahada,
right?
Like, are,
but like mass executing
Muslim.
Shias, like in northern Iraq, is like not what Islam actually teaches, and like molesting little boys is not what the Catholic Church teaches as part of its
like
doctrine.
When you don't have like that kind of like, you know, sort of like system where it's like, okay, well, that isn't really what the religion is about. When it's just like, well, it's just about kind of like seeking power through ritual. And then
being
it's like,
your own god,
but no
you can do
one
whatever
ever
you want.
does like anything bad, like based on that. It's like kind of like that, like because you can't make the distinction, then you end up with this like ridiculous idea that like, you know, this like never is like a factor, like on the sort of dunya level, the sociological level, like in any bad acts that ever happen, you know.
Couldn't possibly.
And like I said, for any idea that is like an important idea isn't like complex enough and like vast enough to encompass like the whole spectrum of human behavior.
Yeah,
you know,
and could easily be corrupted, like and you perverted into something that like is not in the spirit of the original thing.
Or the true idea.
Yeah. It is funny that one of the funniest reveals that Lavenda has about talking to Aquino, because I guess they were friendly, and this is another thing he lists as like a mark against. It's a very funny like lib like mark against Aquino that he has. But he says that after the Parkland shooting in Florida in 2018, he talked on the phone with Michael Aquino, and you know they were talking about the shooting, and Aquino tells him like, yeah, but like that was all staged, right? And Lavenda was kind of blown away by like this like Sandy Hook truther turn of Michael. He's like, Michael Aquino was like a high-ranking military intelligence officer, like expert occultist, like participant in the Phoenix program, and he's asking me if like the Parkland shoot. And I guess Lavenda lived in Florida and like knew one of the families, either of a kid who had died or been wounded, so he was like very close to it and like knew that it was like, I mean, regardless of what they're doing to kids to make them, I think that's a separate line of like, what are they doing to these kids to make them want to be shooters? I think that's a fruitful line of inquiry. But then the more like Sandy Hook, Alex Jones, like it's crisis actors, you know, that's like conspiraslop, you know, and like Michael Aquino is like really down with like the conspiraslop thing that like nobody was even killed. It was all just made up, you know, and for the master of psyops himself to be like, you know, he was a little older and had cancer and was kind of, you know, he would shoot himself a year after that.
Kind of like making excuses for, like, I feel like, I don't want to make excuses for Aquino or like say like that is out of step with like, you know, who he was as a person, because like
maybe he's not that dumb. Maybe he was trying to like psyop Lavenda or something and like seed bullshit. And do a little lie.
Like I think that like in like being smart is complicated, you know, like there are like incredibly intelligent people who like believe false things. You know, like there are incredibly like there can be like that's the thing. Like I almost feel like it's weird. It's this weird kind of it reminds me almost of something that you see like among like leftists, like you know, on Twitter and stuff, right? With the sort of fixation with like stupidity and intelligence, like this weird kind of like credentialism, where it's like he had a PhD. It's like,
right? How could he believe this nonsense?
People, like lots of honestly people who aren't even intelligent have PhDs, and even among the people who are intelligent who have PhDs, you know, like they like intelligence and like being wrong like are totally separate, I think. Like, you can
in a way,
like,
kind of minimizes Aquino to be like, I didn't realize he was so stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Like, yeah, exactly. It's like, how could he think this? Is like, well, you know, he worships the devil. You know, like, it's kind of like, you know, so
right, like, yeah. And Aquino always is. He's smart to a point, but he's also like a major sued on like many levels. You know?
Yeah, he is. He is a sued, and like that's the thing. Like, there's also this kind of thing where like this is another aspect to it. The other thing is like that like someone isn't like a real like worth taking seriously. Like if they have beliefs like that, like they can't really be a bad like like. It diminishes like the ability to take Aquino seriously, quote unquote, as like an important person or like someone who's worth talking about or like but like I mean look at the people who like make the most consequential decisions in our world. Like are their beliefs like less like ridiculous than Aquino's? They like do they believe
especially
do they
right
not
now
believe in like false do they not believe in false conspiracy theories? I mean we just read that thing from Fidel Castro, right?
Yeah, right. Even Fidel Castro like kind of took the LaRouche information and kind of was just like, oh, interesting. Yeah. So even like, yeah, exactly. You can get totally, Joseph Stalin got psyoped by Alan Dulles. It does happen. And then people that are like people of Aquino's side of the coin, the World Anti-Communist League, U.S. military, the psychological operations, like deep state guy who also loves like Irandian kind of Satanism, like that's kind of you're going to run into a lot of dumb ideas in that milieu. Like, I mean, if you're standing back objectively of like kind of like wacky, perverted views of like reality in the world, and so it's like not that crazy that he would. I mean, yeah, he also said things around this time in his life about 9/11 and like the holographic plane theory, and that they actually flew the real planes to like an airbase in Massachusetts and killed everybody.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
And he could be playing a little game because he would always go in those above top secret forums and like drop hints about stuff and play the little insider, and I think he found that amusing at the very least. But yeah, there is this weird thing. It's like you see it happen with a lot of like figures where sometimes like relentlessly making fun of them as being stupid kind of minimizes like the venality of their actions and like in a way like kind of exonerate, like puts them in this like funny like, category.
Exactly,
that's
like where it's like, okay, well, but they're strong and you're weak and like you can't do anything and they control the world and you're like the only sort of refuge you have is to like sort of mock their intellect and say that like their beliefs are silly, but like their history as actors, to paraphrase Karl Rove, it kind of makes me creating their reality.
Yeah, it makes me think about how some leftists like talk about like somebody I really don't like, Senator John Fetterman, and there's like a kind of, I think with that kind of sector of like leftist Twitter that you're referencing. Despite a lot of these people like having him on their podcasts and like totally gassing him up for like 8 years,
they have to go on hard on him because they're doing penance. Because like
it's a little embarrassing to have boosted this guy so shamelessly up until being a senator, and then oops, you found out he was a Zionist.
The bitter lesson,
right. But
like surprisingly few of them, but some have finally internalized, at least for this round of the Morris Cats parade. I guess that
the Morris Cats parade. Yeah. He was another famous Morris Cats candidate, and but there is a kind. I know it's an easy layup because he is wacky. He also suffered from a stroke, so he's not the most articulate person. And is like a psychotic Zionist and a turncoat from what he ran on, etc. Like mostly, I think he never really hid the Zionism, but people had wishful thinking with Morris Katz at the helm. So, whatever. But there's a way in which it like kind of like minimizes by talking about how dumb he is, and like he's a big ogre man who's stupid and gets in fights and gas station parking lot or something, and like he's a dummy and he's so stupid. Isn't he so stupid? It's like, well, he's a senator and you helped make him a senator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like I don't know, like just hate him. I don't know. You don't have to make it about this like goofy. Look how dumb. Because if you lean into that kind of like jokey conception of he's just so goofy and dumb, I can't wait to laugh at what he does next week. Well, like he's doing bad things and he's like a piece of shit, and he's cognizant enough to like be conscious of what he's doing. And I just don't see like the real, like how much mileage you get out of being like, he's so dumb, because you could be smart and evil too. Like,
yeah,
and
you can be dumb and really like, or you can like believe in correct things, or you can be whatever, and like you can still be like a pernicious
powerful
force in the world and powerful. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like it's kind of
Yeah.
like, like they want like a movie mastermind bad guy who like plays chess and plays the piano and like, he's like a worthy adversary or something.
Right.
Like by your concept of like who's a worthy adversary, we're like, like these real people like, but, and again, like I think it's complicated because like you, on one hand, like there's two levels to it. On one hand, like they're not dumb in ways that matter a lot of the time, where it's like the ways in which they may be like dumb or like not as well educated or as well versed in whatever as you are, like that is not like really important for them, and like it's not stopped them from being in some cases trillionaires, like and
right, all
like,
the Silicon Valley clowns, like we know they're clowns, but like even like a lot of liberals sometimes like they do, like look at Elon and his weird chest and like he's so goofy looking, like, and he's so stupid.
He thinks chess is a stupid game and he plays Polytopia, like it's easy.
Right.
It's like
I actually I really don't like that
easy.
with the Silicon Valley ghouls, that like the people try with Peter Thiel too. Like, he's so stupid. He left his membership list on his stupid website where hackers could just get at it. He's so dumb. I mean, maybe that was a mistake, but it doesn't mean he's like, you shouldn't like worry about him, and he's like so dumb that he these people are going to trip over their own dicks and destroy themselves, and like we don't have to do anything except sit back and laugh at them, because then the chorus will grow so magnificently. It'll be like the biggest Jon Stewart studio audience of all time, giving the little smug look, and everyone's clapping, and and then he'll be owned and shrink into a corn cob and disappear. And that's not how it works in real life.
Well, like it's amazing. Like that really was like a, I'm gonna finish my earlier point in a second, but I do want to say that really was like kind of like an idea. Like so much of like internet discourse, like again, people are gonna think I'm overinflating it, and maybe I am giving it too much credit, but I think like it should not be underestimated, which is sometimes is like how much of like these kind of among millennials, how many of them were shaped like formatively by like new atheism and like stupid like basically Reddit atheism, like kind of like owning people like in online like forum debates, like through satire and mockery, the ultimate weapons of politics as shown by the great Lenny Bruce and George Carlin. Like
tip that
like,
fedora.
That is like their ultimate like sort of value system, and they can't like quite shake it, and they can't like discover anything else. Like they're like rooted in this worldview where like the ultimate like the greatest threat to the world is like believing in God, and also like the ultimate weapon against evil is like satire and mockery. When like really like, and like this like really runs through like the whole like kind of like historiography of like comedy and art in a way where like people like are always so desperate to like show like comedy and satire as like the speaking truth to power or like whatever, when really like comedy is like almost always like a force of reaction and like it's like a conservative force. It is usually
court
like,
jesters.
The new idea where like they were literally court jesters, and like if the fucking king didn't like them, he would have executed them. That shows you that like they were useful to the king. Why? Because they amused him. And a lot of the time, for most of history, comedy, like even though now it's like true comedy is only punching up, that is like literally like 10 years old. For most of history, comedy is about punching down.
And the comedy industry is already turned a complete about face. Like now it's like Tony Hinchcliffe has like Netflix specials, and like all of these like based like anti-PC comedians are like reigning ascendant again. And it's like, okay, that's more actually a reversion to the historical mean, than that's how it has been, even in the great Lenny Bruce era. It's funny, I was in a New Age bookshop in Sedona, and they had like Lenny Bruce books like wedged in between all this like theosophy shit and like other like mystical things, and it was like the autobiography of Lenny Bruce. And it's like, how did this? Why is this seen as like spiritually enlightening? I don't really. I get at the time, like, he made jokes about social problems and nobody else was doing it because everyone was a court jester. And he is like a court jester who kind of got the hook, like pulled off because he was a little too wild. But like, that should be like a reminder of what the comedy industry like generally is, rather than like if we all could just like behave like Lenny Bruce and be like mega dirtbags, then we're gonna like, I don't know, save the world or something like that. I don't know if all of them feel like they're saving the world, but some of them I think do feel like they feel the inflated importance of the comic, like as a great holder of charismatic authority in our modern culture. And some people, I think there's some like segments of DSA that literally think like comedians are the vanguard, at least in LA. But
yeah, for sure. No,
they're
absolutely.
the vanguard of the revolution.
Like, and being funny is truly like the ultimate axis of like political authority and like of like political value. It's like all about I mean, but to go back to my earlier point, like I feel like so on one hand, like, yes, whether like they are dumb in the way that or whether they're smart in the way that you value or not isn't relevant like to their power. And also like the whole like in terms of the Aquino thing of like, did he believe the Parkland thing? How could you think that? It's almost like then like, I mean, I guess they're kind of they kind of go hand in hand, they're kind of the same thing, but it's like that is then used to, as you said, like to kind of like dismiss them, and then like not like in the case of someone like Aquino, it's less true with someone like Elon, but with Aquino, it's like, oh, well, because this guy was like a Dungeon and Dragon LARPer who like went to Vevelsburg Castle, and this was all corny, like that means that like this is not an important this is not a person like worth talking about, and this proves that like he like the like Aquino is not a like a relevant figure or something, but like
a figure to take somewhat seriously.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that like this whole thing of like, I mean, almost one of the greatest examples I think is Cass Sunstein's like paper about like conspiracy theories, right? And like all these like irrational, crazy beliefs people have, which he co-wrote with Adrian Verbuel.
He sure did.
And like what do people like that think about Adrian Vermeule's beliefs these days? And it's like like
I remember that was we need to cognitively infiltrate online radical communities, right? Online radical subcultures. Yeah. So he did that, and then it was outsourced to a bunch of like art guys in New York who do that for a living.
yeah, exactly.
Curious art guys who just have made it their entire personality. So interesting. It is. Yeah, going back on the cat and the nudge theory, all that shit.
Yeah,
that was some sinister shit for sure.
Right. Yeah. But like so and like another thing that like this is actually something where I kind of agree with Peter Levenda, but I think that he should like kind of consider his own point in a way, or I guess maybe I agree with him more than I agree with what Nick Bryant was trying to insinuate, but I think that he also like is wrong in a way too, maybe. So Nick Bryant said like, do you think that like the Temple of Set and the Church of Satan split was like kind of orchestrated between LaVey and Aquino, and that Aquino kind of said, like he went to make this more like intellectual thing for like serious people, and the Church of Satan was just like, this basic thing.
An entry level to get people in the door, like a multi-tiered cult, more than like it was kayfabe that they had totally split in a way.
No. Yeah, and I think that's wrong. And I also think that it's interesting, but I think it's wrong. And I think that the split was real to an extent, even though obviously Aquino still had like the deepest, like it wasn't a fight really, because they still had the deepest respect for Anton LaVey and revered him.
He still kind of defend him.
That very fact, like I think attests to like the way that Nick Bryant represented it, where the Church of Satan was just like, not serious and not like serious about goofy, magic or whatever. Yeah. That's like that's kind of a mischaracterization in some ways, because like they did like, the Satanic Rituals is a book that Anton LaVey, like, I don't know if he had help, but like he did write that. So like he did put that out as part of like the, there is like magic in the Church of Satan, right? They did
there's
magic
rituals, the black
they
mass.
weren't that, you know, Aquino like took it in a different direction.
Yeah,
but like that, he didn't take it like a, you know,
it's not fundamentally different.
I think that like I think
really?
it's overstating like the difference, like where it's like
Yeah.
one is like the carny showman, big old joke, you know, where it's
The
just like
dark
LOL
army officer. Doctor.
And the other one is like, you know, the serious true occultism, and that was part of Aquino's branding in a way, but I think that the difference is much, it's less stark than that. And like, you know, as people know, like I infiltrated. I did not like actually sincerely join.
Right.
You know, this is
just the ground floor to see if it was actually real.
It
was years before. Yeah.
When Dimitri first told me about the Temple of Set, you know, I did I did gain membership or gain acceptance of the Temple of Set, and my takeaway from that is like in terms of Nick Bryan's point about like how like, oh, it's so easy to join the Church of Satan. I don't think it's hard to join the Temple of Set.
No,
I don't
you
think
know
it's
what to
hard
tell
get
them.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
hold on just one second. I'm gonna readjust my dog.
Word. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Word. I think interesting there. I think there might be some slight blind spots with Lavenda's take on Aquino, but it'd be interesting to read directly from some of his work someday, because he's kind of I feel like some topics he's like the only guy that's written like a really crazy book about certain things, and maybe we have to take him with a little grain of salt, but yeah. But anyways, I think we'll wrap it up there today. Thanks for joining us, everybody. As always, patreon.com/supplementaljihad. Come and get in line for the Grotto of Truth Q&A, or ask us a question directly, and we'll probably answer it faster than in this format. But for those who like to play the long game, I think this is
send us a message in a bottle.
Send us a message in a bottle. So we'll be back. We'll be back next week on Patreon with a new app. But until then, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.